Go Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yameen of Revolution, and Putin isn't playing with these terrorists. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, I knew that Putin wasn't going to play with the head choppers who are looking to behead Christians. No, he's saving the Christians. He's the defender of the Christians on this planet, is President Putin. Iran. You know, I was very rude to Iran yesterday. I want to apologize. I just wanted them to do their job and not expect Russia to do everything. Well, Iran doing more than enough, and they sending a bunch of soldiers. Look like World War III definitely going to happen in Syria. But let's start with this news. That's not all over the news. We do know the U.S. had a $10 million bounty on the alleged head of the terrorist organization, al-Jawlani, but they just did that to pretend like they was hunting him. Well, guess what? Since he decided to play tough with Putin this time, he's dead, and the U.S. owed Putin $10 million. That's a fact. Long Queen salute. You put $10 million on the man head, this man right here, U.S., you had $10 million on this man head. This man is the head terrorist. They have been protecting this man. But this time Putin say, I'm not finna let this man hide out no more, man. I done let y'all get a peace agreement, and this what y'all try to backdoor me. Russia found him, killed him. This in the beginning of the war. You know, I was waiting on CNN and MSNBC, BBC, Sky News to bring up that the head terrorist is killed. This was like Bin Laden. They don't want to say nothing. Well, y'all know what Putin stayed. Y'all know his bank account? Because y'all owe that man $10 million. Pay that debt. See, America didn't want to kill him. See? America put $10 million on your head, they pretend like they looking for you. If Russia looking for you, you got problems. So he's there. He won't be beheading no more Christians. He won't be looking for the tomb of John the Baptist. Y'all do know, allegedly, John the Baptist's tomb is in Syria. That's allegedly now. So let's just stay with me. That's what they say, John the Baptist. You know, these terrorists are looking for all Christian monuments. They destroy them. Look for anything tied to where any of the saints could have been. They looking to destroy that. Yes. But he can't destroy nothing no longer because he's dead. He's a CIA puppet that met his maker. But they don't want to report the head terrorist, the head chopper that got whacked today. And Iran and Russia, they just getting started. They pissed off. I would be pissed too. The U.S. does sick, vicious army of terrorists on them boys, man. They're killing everything in sight too. And the news media, they're not saying nothing about that. The terrorists, they kidnapping women. The news media don't want to tell it. I'm so disgusted about our media, man. This is disgusting. Rebels seize Aleppo. Bin Laden and people, the news should be horrified if Bin Laden and people seized anything, but they're not. That's how you know who backing these people. And I'm going to play a video. This is bigger army than we about 20,000 terrorists. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's why Syria had to regroup, you know. So, Turkey, they got Turkish army captains and lieutenants is in there leading the way. Ukrainian drone specialists, they in the fight. Once again, just like in Ukraine, NATO. See, that's why they did the ceasefire the next day. The U.S. made Israel do a ceasefire in Lebanon so they can put their terrorists into the fight. But Putin started off with the head terrorist, Giuliani. He's dead. Pay that man Putin is $10 million, man. We want to do good business in the U.S. The days of bad business is over. We had 10 million on the terrorist head terrorist. Putin found him, whacked him. Man, pay that man his 10 million, man. Come on, man. Don't hold out on Putin like. I had to start this off with this information just to let y'all know, because the mainstream media is not going to say shit about that because they don't want the terrorists to feel defeated. Well, their boss is dead. He's not hiding out no bunker. Terrorists don't believe that. He's dead. And you next. All right. So we can now get to some more information. I just thought that off. Because when I seen that, I was like, I felt good when I seen that earlier. I said, oh shit, okay. Because I ain't gonna lie, I ain't been feeling good. Because the terrorists overrunning Syria. That good dinner, man.
As the gunfire of the Korean War was just beginning to die out, and every decade since has been scarred and marred by the efforts of the empire to stay on top, and the necessary and obvious struggle of those underneath to get that boot off their necks. That means that many a time, people that one wouldn't normally invite round for dinner are the people who are fighting against empire domination. This is an important nuance that some people, including some people who should know better, are going to have to learn. I refer, of course, to the recent upsurge of terrorist violence in the Syrian Arab Republic. It's not necessary to support Bashar al-Assad or the Ba'ath Party or the Syrian regime to oppose the empire trying to overthrow them. I would oppose the empire if it was trying to overthrow the king.
Well, I support Bashar al-Assad. See, I had to learn real history and understand what was going on over there in that Middle East. You know, I had to find out that under Saddam, black people were safe in the Middle East. You could walk around Iraq and you wouldn't be enslaved. You just regular crime that can happen to you would happen to you, but you wouldn't be preyed upon because you was black under Saddam. After they whacked Saddam Hussein, and then those radicals start raving through Iraq, your ass could get it. Same thing with Libya. Under Gaddafi, black people were respected in Libya. You could walk the streets, you wouldn't be harassed. You can find work. Many Black Panthers fled to Libya. They killed Gaddafi, your ass get put in cages. Christians wasn't safe when Gaddafi was killed. Christians wasn't safe when Saddam was killed. But one of some of the new Shiites in Iraq, they all right. But I'm talking about the head choppers and ISIS and them, the radical Salafists, Wahhabis. I'm talking about them bastards. So the reason I salute family, the reason I respect Bashar al-Assad, I heard all a dictator, he torturing PR. Under Assad, Assad is the Christian protector in Syria. Under Assad, you can, and this is very important because a lot of times when people think about Islam in the Middle East, in certain places, it's like, if you're a Christian, you don't have a chance in hell. That's what I was taught growing up, you know? Oh, they weren't going to play no games with you. Well, not up under the men I just told you, Saddam, Gaddafi, and Assad. Christians were protected under Assad. You can be a Christian. They respect you in Syria. The U.S. is trying to overthrow that. They trying to push people in power who behead Christians, and you will have to accept Islam or you'll get beheaded. That's a fact. And black people, your ass ain't got a chance in hell. You got to be part of their army and shine their shoes. That is a fact, Jack. So when I heard this, Assad was defending blacks, and he is, the hell with anybody telling you, you can go to Syria as a black person, they respect you, you won't, racist bullshit won't happen until, you know, it's big, it's everywhere. But they're trying to put people in power that's going to erase that. But this happened under Barack Obama. They trying to make it to where it's dangerous for us all around the world by the people they put in power. Under them Ukrainians, under them, it'll be hell on us if the Azov Battalion get in power. And we need to bring that up. Why the hell is the U.S. trying to put everybody in power that don't like us? So I respect Bashar al-Assad. I want him in power. I don't want him to lose his country. We don't need to lose allies who respect our people, bro. That's real fucking talk, man.
Kings of Arabia. How about that then?
Helping the U.S., we're going to find ourselves, we can't go nowhere. That's what they want.
Has the right.
They want to say you're only safe here with us. We ain't that safe around them.
The roost, especially when they are propagandizing all of us as to their culpability, their complicity, their bloody-handed collaboration in the crushing of the Palestinian people in Gaza, of the catastrophe of the Anglo-American invasion of Iraq. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the same people who carried me on their shoulders, literally, for the power of my opposition to the invasion of Iraq, who now spit upon my name because I won't support the same people who invaded Iraq, invading Syria. Wake up, you people, or at least stop trying to deceive us if this that you're displaying is not torpor, but hypocrisy. If you're not a hypocrite, wake up to who is behind the Al-Qaeda, ISIS, alphabet soup of extremist fanatics who are right now cutting off heads in Aleppo, kicking over Christmas trees in Aleppo, looking for priests and nuns to murder.
Come on, man. This is not a game. That's not hyperbole, man. This is disgusting and sick. They are hunting down Christians, and if they find you, your ass is grass. The U.S. is backing this. Them damn congressional black shoe shiners, shame on them. If they find any black people around there, your ass is getting in the fields. Now, folks be like, man, nobody getting no field. That's a fact. If they catch you, your ass is on a slavery auction block. That's them. And you definitely not finna be no motherfucking Christian in their presence, bro. That's real talk, man. This is not no fucking game, bro.
In Aleppo, wake up if it is indeed a torpor that you are in. These knives that are cutting off heads again in Aleppo, who gave them these knives? Who sharpened
this war, the Syrian war? I know about that better than I know about Ukraine. Like I say, that's when I really start paying attention to geopolitics. I just came home from prison and they killed Gaddafi. Oh, whoa, I didn't know. I'm like, what the hell going on? Congressional Black Caucus shocked the hell out of me. They was down with black people. They didn't say one word. Al-Qaeda running around, killing everybody, everything, moving in Syria. I remember Gaddafi came on TV. Gaddafi said, that's Al-Qaeda. Anybody, I done played that a million times. I played Gaddafi on TV. He said, that's Al-Qaeda. Hillary Clinton say, no, it's not. He's lying. They're using Viagra and raping women and kids. What? Then they kill Gaddafi. And I'll be damned. And then they kill Christopher Stevens, the U.S. ambassador to Libya. That's when the gig is up. And that's when the Republicans start screaming about Benghazi. Benghazi. Well, guess what? Benghazi was the place Gaddafi was trying to attack because Benghazi was the head of the home for Al-Qaeda. But they know people not paying attention. You don't really know what's going on. But once again, same old damn playbook. But these the same people. That's what we got. These ain't no fucking rebels. This is Al-Qaeda and ISIS, the head choppers, man.
Who gave them these fancy new uniforms that they're wearing? Who gave them these weapons that they're firing? Who gave them the transport that they're moving around in? Wake up if it is torpor that you are suffering. You know the answer to that. NATO, Turkey, Qatar, a cat's paw of the United States empire and host to the largest United States military base in the entire world. That's who's paying for it. That's who's providing it. Who's doing the necessary public relations warfare for this latest uprising of the ISIS Al-Qaeda death cult? The United Kingdom, of course, the same people who've spent the last 14 months telling you that Hamas are Islamist terrorists are telling you that the actual Islamist terrorists in Syria are rebels or even freedom fighters. Can't you see that? I don't believe, that many of you can't see that. When this group today warned Hamas that they were coming for them, they were going to Karbala to drag the Shiites through the streets, and they were coming to Gaza for Hamas. Which part of that formula do you not understand? If Hamas can be takfired, can be expelled from the religion, excommunicated by a group of Chinamen from Xinjiang, Turkmen, Albanians, Indian restaurant waiters from Cardiff, can expel Hamas from their deen. Which part of that do you not understand? It's not about supporting the Ba'ath Party in Syria. As a matter of fact, I was persona non grata there for decades. I was with Iraq, of course. You see, they're arch enemies. You see, you loved me for that. You carried me on your shoulders for that. I never set foot in Damascus between 1980 and the 21st century. I have no relationship with the regime in Damascus. They've never given me a penny or even a baklawa. As a matter of fact, they still owe me an airline ticket for attending a conference that they invited me to. I have nothing to do with this regime, but I have everything to do with defeating the efforts of the American, Anglo-American empire and its attempt to overthrow any government that does not slavishly serve them. Ask the people of Georgia, where a French citizen masquerading as the president of Georgia has just declared that she is the only legitimate public official in the country. And the NGOs have come out of the Trojan horse and are on the streets in another regime change operation. You're supposed to support them. They're looking to manufacture consent from you for NATO and EU involvement. Do you think these people care about the Georgians? They want to use Georgia against Russia. Do you think they care about Ukrainians? They want to use Ukraine against Russia. Do you think they care about Syrians? They want to use ISIS and Al-Qaeda to weaken the resistance to Israel and to put more pressure on Russia. Can't you see that? I'm asking you, can't you see what I'm saying? Because if you can't, you've no business pretending to be in solidarity with the Palestinian resistance, just takfired by the people you're asking me to support in Syria. Can't you see it? If you open your eyes, you definitely will. Nothing to do with supporting Bashar al-Assad. I didn't support his father. And I didn't support the passage of power from his father to him. But I will stand until my last breath with the idea of the Syrian Arab Republic, where in Malula nuns can pray, learn, and teach all day. I will support the idea of a Syria in which the multiple ethnicities and religious minorities all have a right to live, all have a right to pray the way they want to pray, all have a right to put up a Christmas tree or Eid lights, all have a right to pray to the one God in any way that they choose. I will support the idea of a Syrian Arab Republic where women go to work, go to study, sit in the restaurants with their families, who have an idea of themselves. I don't know if you know many Syrians. They're the highest nosed Arabs of them all. They have a very high opinion of themselves, and so they should. Their history, their culture, their resistance to Israeli occupation, their solidarity with the Palestinians in struggle. For 75 years, they have a right to be proud of themselves. They're very successful people, very good in business, very good in media, very good in the arts. You think they're going to be ruled by Uyghurs and Turkmen? You really think a waiter from Cardiff is going to tell the Syrian people what to do? You really think an Albanian is required in Syria to show them how to pray, to show them how to worship God in the right way? You really think that? If you do, you've never met a Syrian. So I don't know how this is all going to end, but however it ends, it won't change my point of view. My point of view has been consistent for the entire 10 years of this assault to destroy Syria, in the interests of the empire and in the interests of the Israeli enemy just across the Golan Heights. That's not going to change. Whoever wins, whoever loses. I don't work like that. And on that subject, to the people who complain to me, try to cajole me, even bully me into bringing this Pakistani or that Pakistani onto the mother of all talk shows to talk about recent events in that benighted country, forget about that. We don't let YouTube, who pay us lots of money, pick our guests. We're certainly not going to allow anybody else to pick them. We're not a mouthpiece or an organ of the PTI or of Imran Khan personally. That's not how we work. We're supporting Imran Khan because he's the rightful Prime Minister of Pakistan. He was overthrown illegitimately in an American regime change operation because he said absolutely not to the empire. Of course, we're supporting him for that reason. That doesn't mean we're in the PTI or that the PTI have the right to tell us who should be appearing on the mother of all talk shows. You know nothing about me if you think that kind of bullying works with me. It doesn't. So cut it out. The events in Pakistan this week have been so utterly ghastly that if they were happening, say, in Georgia, the British Parliament would be mobilizing their soldiers under the right to protect provision of their self-invented rules-based international order and their right to protect civilians in other people's countries, and would be sending an expeditionary force. But they are saying and doing nothing about the fact that hundreds of unarmed, peaceful democracy protesters were mass murdered in the capital of Pakistan, a nuclear-armed member of the British Commonwealth, a former British colony, and you can't get a British newspaper or a British broadcaster to say, never mind, do anything about it. This is the hypocrisy with a capital H of which I speak. Democracy can be drowned in blood. In Islamabad, its leader, its elected premier, in a rat-infested dungeon. They even kidnapped his cat this week because it had the temerity to be friends with him. And now the rats are back in the rat-infested cell that the Pakistan cricket captain, that the international figure, leader, Imran Khan, is being kept in. You think we might not oppose that? You must think we're like the British government, like the British Foreign Office, like the British Overseas Development. We're not like any of these. We identify the truth and we proselytize it. We campaign for it, whatever the cost, whomsoever likes it or doesn't. As Malcolm said, we're for justice, no matter who it's for, no matter who it's against. That's why we're with Imran Khan. Now, when Jimmy Dore joins us in the second hour, we are going to have a ball. I've just listened to his interview with Tucker Carlson. It is a masterpiece, a master class of the genre. Jimmy Dore's observation about the so-called liberal, so-called progressive American, so-called left is so on the money. I wish I'd said much of it myself, but I did the next best thing. I invited Jimmy Dore to speak to you in the second hour of this, the 400th edition of the mother of all talk shows.
By Said Mohammed Marandi, who was pointing out that the Turks didn't, while they spoke very loudly, they never did anything to support the Palestinians or the Lebanese. Meanwhile, now they're instead, launching these attacks against Syria, actually weakening Lebanon. So, to what extent is this? You mentioned that the public, of course, is very concerned about the Kurds and this
the Turkish public.
Yeah, Turkish
yes.
public. Sorry, yeah, but to what extent is this seen as being problematic, given that they're juggling all these different balls at the same time?
Very problematic. I mean, it's a big force, 15,000. Some reports say, big force with tanks, a whole tank division, all with the latest Western equipment, NATO equipment. This is a highly trained force of considerable size, and it's being taken on by the Russian Air Force and the Syrian Air Force, who are bombing them, and they are suffering big casualties. But they seem to be, the last I heard just before coming onto this program was they were on the outskirts of Aleppo. They'd got that far. This is Erdogan has launched a major operation to disrupt Assad, to take territory and occupy territory, and for the Americans, because the Americans, these groups, the al-Nusra successor groups, I mean, which this is has been working with the Americans throughout this. So, their second job is to cut the supply lines and to attack. Already one Iranian general has been killed in this process. So as I say, this is really a very disruptive event taking place in this. And, Russia is bombing them with their air force really heavily, as are the Syrian Air Force. And the Syrian army is engaged, but they are well equipped, they have tanks, they have all the facilities. So we have to see what happens, but one should not estimate this. This is not a sort of little gang of, militia, just sort of jihadists coming together in a group of 30 or 15,000 strong, something like that. Erdogan means business.
These jihadists were only trained and armed by Turkey or United States, who are involved in preparing this, I guess, ground force?
Yes, they were trained by the Americans and the Turks together. That was during the period when it was, they were working together to try and overthrow Assad. So they were trained and paid for by the United States mainly. But this is a Turkish intelligence initiative, as I understand it, from the people in the region who are following it very closely. So it's so another sort of front is really opening out. Because Syria and Russia are going to push back hard. The Israelis are talking now about trying to use the Kurds as another front against the northeast Syria, as another front against Iran and against the axis of resistance. So things are getting, not wholly unexpectedly, but when a war widens, it brings in extraneous conflicts into it, and they sort of mesh in, and they can also mess up lots of things at the same time.
Perhaps we could discuss the Ukrainian situation, because in some.
No, I just want y'all to be filtering on them good details that he providing, that the news is not providing, about how Turkish intelligence it has their soldiers guiding these terrorists, giving them intelligence, radar, satellite images and things of that nature. NATO giving them, telling them exactly where certain Syrian army groups and Russians are at, so they can attack them. Salute. And they're not telling the truth about what the hell is going on in Syria.
And commentator
the Iranians
in Germany
and the
and
Russians
founder of Syria
absolutely
Analysis,
not gonna go for it.
a platform dedicated
Racist
to Middle
head
Eastern
chop not win this.
analysis. How are you, Kavork? And I'm sorry that we're meeting under these circumstances, but it is good to see you.
Thank you for having me, and I'm sorry to wake you up so early.
I'm more than happy. I really want our viewers to understand what's going on, and I can't really think of a better person to go through that, especially since we're going to be talking about Aleppo, which is a heavy concentration of Armenians. So I'm very happy to have you on. And John, how are you faring?
Doing great. It's nice to wake up early on Sunday, get the day started early. But this is such an important conversation. So I was incredibly excited when I heard last night that we were going to have this show. And I hope that our listeners can really appreciate and understand some of the fundamental dynamics in Syria, because there's so much misinformation that we get in the United States that leads to all of these crazy types of ideas that people have in their heads, to the extent that you have a lot of pro-Palestinian people here that are anti-Assad and questioning Syria. It's very, very strange. So we'll get into all of that, I'm sure.
John, are you based in the United States?
I am. Yeah, I'm based in the United States. I'm in
Cool.
Colorado.
Cool. I hope to see you soon in the United States.
Ooh,
I
that's
will,
it.
I will, I will, I will not get a visa, but there is a person contacting me. He's an Armenian American. He says he's an attorney general in the US or something, and he can secure a visa. So let's see. I hope that works.
Ooh, love
Well, yeah,
that.
you'll have to let me know. And
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
eat all
I'll
of
make
the disgusting American food.
We will go to Armenian restaurants with you guys. Don't worry.
Let's get right into it. I don't even really know where to start. John, do we start? Because the
Well,
ceasefire happened, and then kind of all of a sudden,
a lot has happened. I think maybe we start with the kind of the basic developments on the ground over the last 2 days. Of course, we know things have been incredibly dynamic. We heard reports about 2 days ago that broke out that HTS and other armed groups were beginning to make progress. We've heard a lot of misinformation. So maybe we can kind of start there with like what is the actual reality on the ground. We heard reports that Assad had fled to Russia. Those cannot be true. So
Not
can you
true.
maybe kind of give us
Never
just
was fled.
some basic dynamics of
Syria.
where things are on the ground right now as we understand them?
I just want to, at the beginning, to mention when I say this is an analysis, this is my analysis, and then there are information coming from Damascus. So for the people to understand what are we talking about. I think what happened in Aleppo was anticipated. It was expected. And we have been tracing the movement of these militants for quite some time. And they are not the most, let's say, private organizations that they keep their things for themselves. And even individuals like ourselves, we can detect their movement and we can see what they're planning for. And they have big mouths, like many people in the area. We like to brag.
Putin, he got to punish the leader of Turkey once and for all. He got to punish him once and for all. He done allow him to make it for far too long, and that his betrayal is unimaginable. What he just tried to do, which exposed the hand of the West, but showed how these Arab nations, these sheikdoms, these kingdoms, man, these people are puppets and bought and paid for by the West. No, they are trying to overthrow the people that's helping Palestine. That's what's so crazy about this. Y'all, they don't want to help the Palestinians, but you trying to attack Syria, which is the land route to get to Hezbollah and to get some weaponry to the Palestinians. See, this is really disgusting. The Turks down with it, Qatar down with it, Saudi Arabia down, the United Arab Emirates, all of them is down with this play. These they head choppers. Fundamentally, these they head choppers. And that's why I'm sitting back like, man, see, Putin understand that he can't play with these people. He got to overthrow their governments and put people in power who's going to align with where the new world order, where that's going. Because now we sit back like, whoa, wait a minute. We can't be bringing these people into BRICS. We can't be bringing those who are paying the head chopper. You see what's going on here? This is crazy. Turkey just sitting in BRICS meeting, listening to every goddamn thing. United Arab Emirates is a BRIC member. You see what I'm saying? This geopolitical shit is heavy, bro. But Putin and Iran got to understand they got to stop playing games. Bro. They can't be playing. They can't be forget the missiles. They sending their troops, but they don't have no fucking choice. The head choppers is on the rampage through Syria, bro.
About our future plans. So they were talking about it, and we knew that they're going to attack. The problem with Western Aleppo was a few weeks before this attack, many of the locations where Iranian advisors and Iranian affiliated forces have evacuated. And this was a part of a larger deal in the region to decrease the Iranian influence in the region. And to be honest with you, Syria has an interest in balancing its relationships between the Arabic countries and Iran doesn't mind that. Iran said, I'm here to secure the...
That's BS. See, that's BS. Syria has been backstabbed by the Arab countries. Nobody was helping Syria but Iran, which is a Persian. All the Arab countries had turned on Syria, except Iraq. Egypt tried to, side with the Arabs, but they didn't want to go at Syria because they used to, be one at one point in time. But so Bashar al-Assad need to allow the Iranians to bring as much forces as they want. See, then the people, Iran is taking over Arab nations and all this shit. See, that's the bullshit they're trying to build. Iran is trying to help the resistance, those who trying to fight Israel. You see, the problem is the Arab leaders are subservient to Israel, except Bashar
some of the
al-Assad.
borderlines in the country, and they don't
And
have, let's say,
Nasrallah, who they just
imperialistic
killed,
or
the
colonial
leader of Hezbollah.
aspirations to stay in the country. So when the time comes and the government says that you have to leave, we leave. We don't have a problem with that. So the replacement of these forces were mostly from units that are conscripts, young men who are not, let's say, who haven't engaged in much of war and conflict, and they haven't gained much of an experience, let's say, in the past decade or 14 years. Some of the units that the Syrian army has, they are the elite units. Those are the ones, if they were located there, it was impossible. I would assure you, it was impossible for al-Nusra to break through the fences, because what happened is basically al-Nusra defeated the army through the psychological operations that they have waged through the media outlets. People were talking about the conquer of Aleppo, and Aleppo fell when the al-Nusra was still like 20 kilometers away from the city center. So many locations, these units started to evacuate out of fear. And remember, you're fighting against a very brutal, ideologically driven fighters who are willing basically to slaughter people for the sake of going to the city. So it's not only, fight between two guns. It's also, if you're captured, you are going to be beheaded in the most gruesome way. So people are afraid, and those are young soldiers. Now, they broke through the city, they occupied all the city, unfortunately, and now they are in charge of the airport. And
see what you just said? The news not talking about that. The fact that the psychological warfare, the Syrians and the Russians all understand. If you get captured by the head choppers, your head getting chopped off, goddammit. You're not gonna be a prisoner of war. They don't do prisoners of war.
Two major routes, the M5 between Aleppo and northern Hama, and also the Khanasir. The Khanasir one was an alternative route the government opened during the days of the siege on Aleppo between 2012 and 2014 for the people to be able to travel through the country. This is also blocked now, and today these militants, they sniped an Armenian doctor, and they killed him on this route. Now, why this attack? This attack, which was anticipated by why Turkey unleashed without limits these Nusra Front elements to go to Aleppo. There is mutual ground between Erdogan now and Israel in Syria. Erdogan wants Aleppo, and he wants to create an enclave in northern Aleppo that is loyal to him and send the 3.5 million Syrian refugees in a geographical place where they can have a continuity between Aleppo and Idlib, and also northern Syria, Azaz, Afrin, etc. And they have the borders with Turkey. At the same time, Israel has an interest in destabilizing the north and overstretch the Syrian army, because the Americans have asked Syria to participate in the imposition of what they call ceasefire agreement in Lebanon. Americans see the ceasefire agreement as an opportunity to disarm Hezbollah, weaken it to the extent that they would finish on Hezbollah in terms of its political influence and military presence in the country. So it's multifolded. Want for the local players in Lebanon to run against Hezbollah and to create this hostile environment for Hezbollah in Lebanon. And they demanded Syria to participate in sieging Hezbollah. And they are expecting from Syria basically to stop the flow of weapons and the free movement of the Hezbollah operatives or members between Syria and Lebanon, which they can use also to travel to Iran. So basically, they're asking Syria to kill its ally, Hezbollah. And the first message that was delivered by the Americans to Assad was by the foreign minister of Jordan a few weeks ago, even before the ceasefire agreement. And they told Assad that this is an information now, that the Americans want you to be part of this ceasefire agreement by blocking these supply chains for Hezbollah. And in return, the United States would relieve some of the sanctions against Syria, and they try to bring it back to the Arabic world, this and that. And Assad rejected that. For Assad, it's not like he's just a stubborn person who has suicidal thoughts and he doesn't like to, give concessions. But for Syria, it's also Syria's foreign policy is based on a strategic vision. And Hezbollah is part of a network of alliances in the region, state and non-state actors that have a project of de-Americanization of the region, basically. They don't want for the Americans to have an upper hand. Syria doesn't mind having relationship with the United States, but at the same time, they are part of a broader alliance, which is determined of kicking the American influence out of the region, including Iran, Ansarullah, some of the Iraqi players, and in Lebanon. So Syria has been a victim, basically, of this regime change war for the same exact purpose, to dismantle the axis of resistance. So if Syria survived 14 years of war, they're not going to give this on a golden plate now by strangling Hezbollah. So just from an opportunistic point of view, it again doesn't make sense for Syria to strangle Hezbollah. Now, the Turks and the Israelis came to the same, let's say, mutual interest now in Syria, overstretch the Syrian army. Turkey wants the north, and Israel wants to disturb, let's say, distract the Syrian army in hope for exerting enough pressure on Assad to accept this. Now, the evidence for this argument is, if you see the pattern of the movement militants between Aleppo to Hama, if you see the pattern and how they were moving and where they were moving, it was quite clear that they're going to Homs and then to try to encircle Lebanon. They wanted to create a militant, let's say, siege on Lebanon by the Al-Nusra Front, Al-Qaeda, or HTS, call it whatever you want now, but through these militants, which is the Israeli project. And now the Syrian army, because they received a major blow in Aleppo and they had to retreat, to redeploy, and go to the north, to the south, they have established that they have to defend Hama at all, regardless of the consequences. So the information from Syria is the red line is now Hama. They cannot advance into the city or the south of the city, because then they will encircle, of course, as I mentioned, Lebanon. So defensive line is now going to be in Hama, and then we will see a counter-offensive. And this is again an information which is based on the talks now of Assad with Putin, who was in Moscow. And this was something that I published and then deleted, and the people were like, yes, you're publishing fake news, this and that. I just didn't want to anger some of my sources in Syria, like telling them, oh shit, I published it, you know. He's still in Moscow. He didn't come back yet, you know. It's like this was the only reason I deleted because I didn't want for anyone to say, like, we told you in information, wait so he comes back, you know. And so the second day I said confirmed, because he returned. Now he's in Damascus and he held talks with the Iraqi prime minister. He talked to the Emiratis, he talked to the Saudis, he talked to the Egyptians. And there is an unprecedented Arabic support to Syria, which is crazy if you see how all these countries conspired against Syria in 2011, 2012. But because these countries, there are new realities in the region now, and they see this terrorist attack on the Syrian army as a Turkish expansion in the region. So this genius move of Erdogan brought countries who were at odds, like Iran, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and the rest of the players in the region together against this. And there is going to be consistent financial support now from the Arabic countries. They don't give military support, but good enough financial support to Syria. and there is going to be Iraqi support militarily, Iranian support militarily. Hezbollah, I think, has to stay now this time out of the equation. They have to recover from what they have been through at the current moment. They already have some presence in Syria, but I think it's better for them to stay in Lebanon because the ceasefire could crumble at any moment and hostilities could restart in Lebanon as well. So this is the overall situation. In terms of the fake news, like I was going to hit myself yesterday because when I read like that these people if they publish they've seen flying elephants, they have tens of thousands of followers giving them thumbs up and believing it, and like Assad has been assassinated, there is a coup. Like it seems that somebody Googled the name of the leader of the National Security Bureau in Syria and they found out who is he. So his name was heavily used. This person, if he wants to run a coup against Assad, he is not in charge of the army. Like he can't move a military unit even if he wants to. So how are you telling me that this guy is leading a coup? At least say the chief of staff of Syria, right? Like to make it look more believable, tell me that the chief of staff is leading a coup. And the problem is, you saw me yesterday, I was on Mario's
I
space.
didn't even go in. I said, I'm not going
It's ridiculous beyond belief. Like they're talking about this incident as a fact. And I'm saying, bro, like, my parents now are in Damascus. Like everybody is in the street eating ice creams and going and eating stuff. Like there is nothing in Damascus. Yeah. And then like 2 minutes later, they come back. We have a confirmation from Damascus that the coup is underway. It's like, what are they talking about? Like the problem is it takes so much patience also from us. And from me, not to tell these people first to fuck off, and secondly, it's like I literally making calls to Damascus and not to my parents, to contacts in Damascus, and they're like laughing at me when they hear these reports, right? And you can't tell them who is your source in Damascus, and then they'll say, you have these ties or you have this contact in the
Right.
So you can't tell them, but they're like bluntly and continuously recycling the same thing over and over again. And you're telling them, no, it's not happening. And they're not in Hama. No, they have occupied Hama, but they have not. They have not. So that's why I always say time will tell. Like our friend Jeremy used to say on this
Time will
Ukrainian
tell.
accounts, time will tell. Time will tell. Yes,
Well, I do want to give
yes.
Kabork his props, because if you aren't following Kabork, you should. He's apparently psychic or just has really great sources. Here's Kabork's kudos for predicting the the attack. This is from September 30th. Basically, I mean, it's like the whole story in one picture, honestly. So, also want to touch on, you kept on calling them Al Nusra Front. I love that you call them that because that's what they are. This HTS new iteration rebranding of Al Nusra Front. Let's take a look at who we're dealing with in Aleppo.
داخل حلب الجديدة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. الأبطال المجاهدين الآن. الله أكبر.
He did try to hide it. He tried to hide it when he saw the camera.
This group is Nuruddin Zinki. So they are, first of all, the CIA paid and trained this group. And they only technically stopped supporting them when they beheaded this child in Aleppo in 2016, where they had a Palestinian kid, they put it in the back of the truck and they slaughtered him on a video and they posted it. Only then the U.S. White House spokesperson, I think back then was John Kirby or something, another, I don't want to call him names now. Anyways, so only then he said, we're going to investigate if there is some violation, this and that. And they stopped the funding. But because the direct funding has stopped, that doesn't mean the US is not supporting them, because they do it through Turkey. And Turkey is a NATO country, and they are still continuously supporting this Nuruddin Zinki. And they're now, as you saw from the badges, they are affiliated with Al-Nusra Fund as well. They're fighting together, and this is not like an isolated incident. Again, yesterday when I was in Mario's space, when I was there were no other Syrians. And once I joined the space, it seems that secretly they started sending to anti-Assad Syrians to join so that they counter my argument. And this was something like every time I mentioned the crimes of Nusra, they said this is an isolated case. This is the same language that Israel uses in Gaza when they slaughter 500 people under tents, and they say this was an isolated incident. And they're using the same tactics at the current moment. But it is not. From the first days of the so-called Syrian revolution, the revolution itself, it started on a sectarian ground. It started by the calls for extermination against the minorities and sending the Christians to Beirut and this and that. And this is a natural development for the type of the peaceful slogans that they raised at the beginning. So now we have a situation where Nusra, Nuruddin Zinki, we have the Islamic Turkestan Army, Uyghurs, Tajikis, Saudis, Chechens, all shades and different nationalities are part of this offensive against Aleppo. But their advances, in my opinion, found a serious resistance in northern Hama. And eyewitnesses who we have in northern Hama, journalists, Syrian journalists reporting from there, and also bypassers and people who escaped Aleppo and now they're going to Damascus because you have to pass through the M5 highway in Hama. They say they tell us, because the army told them not to take pictures or videos, so nobody dares to publish now. But they're telling us the nature of the reinforcement arrived in Hama. It's unprecedented, even when there was an offensive against Aleppo in 2016. So even during the offensive against 2016, the type and nature and amount of reinforcement that the Syrian army sent to northern Hama is not comparable to the type of weapons and the nature of the attack that they did against Aleppo. And this leads me to believe that there is going to be a huge counteroffensive. The international conditions has to be first met for it. And it's important for Syria to not, let's say, disturb or, there are certain agreements with the Arabic countries now, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Syria has found itself in a position that it doesn't have any, let's say, foreign currencies. So they need the UAE to recycle some money, or other countries to send them some medical aid or logistical aid in terms of the fuel, energy, etc. And Saudi Arabia is also trying to lead talks now with Trump to lift the sanctions against Syria. So they have their considerations. I understand that. However, in this case, Syria also wants to get the okay of the Arabic countries. So Egypt gave full support to Syria. Jordan, which is very strange, they expressed support to Syria. Tunisia expressed direct support to Syria. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, and Oman. And Iraq. So these Arabic countries declared that they support the Syrian army now offensive against these terrorists, which is good news, because Syria needed this regional legitimacy, let's say, to wage this offensive against the Turkish-backed terrorists, something that was missing in 2012 when they started the counteroffensives against the so-called Free Syrian Army. Now, the Iranians today, what was his name? Karakchi, the foreign minister of Iran, is in Damascus now. He's holding talks.
Landed like very recently. I just posted the flight about an hour ago.
So he's probably now in Damascus, or he will be in Damascus, and he will hold talks with Assad and then go to Ankara. So let's hope that Erdogan still has some sanity in his head, and he would accept to retreat these forces again from Aleppo and focus only on Idlib. If not, I think this is going to be the case. He will not accept it because he feels now very strong in Syria and invincible. So I think this is going to be, unfortunately, be treated only through military means.
Well, let's take a look at some of the recent Russian strikes, and then I want to ask a couple more questions about this coalition that's forming, and then the talks that Bashar al-Assad had with President Putin. So let's take a look. All right, so there you see some pretty significant strikes carried out by the Russian Air Force. Now, we know that, as I mentioned before, and as you alluded to before, President Bashar al-Assad had emergency talks with President Putin. I'm very curious to get your thoughts. I mean, we understand that Russia has a very significant interest, not only in Syria, but also in the region at large. They've had their own problems with terrorism and instability in the Caucasus. And understand that on one hand there's the assets that they have on the ground in Syria, but there's also this interest to ensure that we don't have this pipeline from Syria through Turkey to the Caucasus of a potential second front that could open up for Russia. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what you believe were some of the outcomes of those emergency talks, and what your assessment is of the Russian armor basically coming to bear so far in Syria, or the Air Force, that is.
So all the sources in Damascus are silent about this, and I think nobody knows except Putin himself and Assad himself. This is something that is very strictly, I would say, private, and they don't share such an information. And it's good because we have to assess how this meeting went by the Russian now Air Force attacks. And this has been accelerated today. There have been busy movements by the Russian Air Force from the Tartus Air Base against the militants inside the city of first Idlib, and then on the peripheries of Aleppo. I think the Russians have an invested interest in Syria to keep the country intact and stabilized. They cannot create any sort of, let's say, balkanization in Syria, where probably the Kurds or probably the Erdoganists could allow such a pipeline, for example, to go to Turkey at a later stage. So this country has to stay united in the hands of one government. Also, even like if you read the so-called pundits on Syria, and they say, yeah, but the Russians have secured their interests in the Mediterranean and they already have a naval base there, so they could abandon Assad and create a Alawite enclave in Tartus, this and that. I mean, I don't even know how to answer this, because if such a scenario happens, this means that the entire Syrian coast will be encircled by the jihadists, and all sorts of attacks, mortar attacks, drone attacks will be on a few kilometers away from the base of Russia. So, of course, this is not going to be plausible or possible, even if the Russians were very opportunistic in this case and they said, it seems that the price for this war is too high and let's just secure our own, let's say, or interest, which is like the Mediterranean, and then we block the access of Qatar to the Qatari gas to the European markets. That's not going to happen. For Russia, they have a clear mission in Syria, and this has been put on the shelf for some time due to disagreements with Turkey. Yesterday, I was reading to one Russian general, which this was Russian, but somebody has translated it on X. I'm not sure if I have it. Just let me check if I have it in my book. I think I saved it. Anyways, so basically what he says is that Russia has been, I'm paraphrasing him, of course. He doesn't say Russia was naive, but it says Russia has been too respectful to the rivals and the enemies and the partners as well. And why he says this? Because Russia respects gentleman agreement, and let alone what is written on paper and is agreed upon. So the Russians, when they have observation points in Idlib, for example, or near Idlib, their observation point is few soldiers with some machine guns. That's it. Like they don't have a big
Mhm.
force in no, because they believe that Turkey will respect this agreement. So they don't need to have a strong military presence to enforce the agreement. But now that Erdogan he sabotaged these agreements, he says it seems that Russia has to impose this agreement with iron and fist, with force. And I think that is the only plausible way now. Like we always say, unfortunately, because we truly hoped that the issue of Idlib would be solved diplomatically through Turkey, through process, slowly but surely. Like we don't want for Idlib to be completely destroyed or the civilians would be in harm's way. No sane person wants that. But now that the entire region's fate is is at stake, I think the realpolitik and unfortunate historical, if you see unfortunate historical events, at some point there has been decision made that was at the moment looked very bloody, but on a long run it had positive impact. And one of these is Aleppo. Like in Aleppo, every day between 2012 and 2016, civilians used to get killed by sniper attacks and mortar attacks. And everybody said, if you want to liberate Aleppo, you might kill civilians. And then is it worth it? This and that. And many people argued and said, yes, there will be some civilians in harm's way. The unfortunate thing, we cannot really deny that. But after that, there is not going to be more killing. And that's what happened between 2016 and 2024. Have any one of you heard of any person dying in Aleppo by a sniper or mortar? And this, that? No, it never happened. I think this is going to be the example that is going to be copied in Idlib, but it's going to be way more bloodier, because this place is like every place that they lost in Syria, they bust them to Idlib. So
Right.
you can imagine how many of them there exist in Idlib.
Like an insane asylum. But maybe we'll bring some levity to the conversation.
Mm.
One of the first things that the terrorists did upon arrival was finally, as Fox News has been warning us for a decade, the war on Christmas is finally here.
Look at the head choppers, y'all. No more Christmas. Look at the head choppers. No more damn Christmas and no more damn Christians. They not showing this on CNN or MSNBC.
He like gave up and then tried to like tuck his shirt. But what I wanted to do.
It's so weird, the obsession with a tree,
They
you
hate
know, like, and I
Christmas.
know
They
this
hate
place.
Christians.
They're so obsessed with the optics and this like stupid things like taking down a tree, you know, what a heroic thing to do. Like they're going to the shops of ordinary people and forcing them to remove the Christmas decorations. And this has been confirmed by multiple people that I know in Aleppo. And there are multiple people, they don't even dare to go out of their apartments because their faces was on social media and they were speaking or supporting or participating in any activities. Even some people who were humanitarian activists and they were participating in the reconstruction of the city, they are scared and they don't leave their apartment at the current moment because their faces was on Syria TV. And these people are very vengeful, you know. And if somebody tells them that this guy was working, let's say, a technician for Syria TV, you could get killed because they believe that you were collaborating with the government, and they say you were waging a propaganda against us, this and that. Now, I want to mention something today. I was reading, I don't want to mention names, but I was reading someone says that I just spoke to my relatives in Aleppo, and this is coming from an Armenian person in Greece. He says, till now, HTS has brought no harm to Christians. Many HTS militants stationed in Christian neighborhoods are from Aleppo. Two, the curfew continues. Three, HTS provides Aleppo with more electricity than Assad. Now, when you read this is, of course, he's talking to his friend, but he doesn't understand the context because, first of all, al-Nusra terrorists, they didn't kill many Christian people in Aleppo or harm them directly, let's say physically, because they are still in fighting. They are still busy with the fight against the Syrian army first. Secondly, the vast majority of the people are at their homes. They're not even living, especially the Christians are, they're scared and they stay at home. What's going to happen for the Christians is if Aleppo stays in the hands of al-Nusra, which these so-called pundits do not understand, it will become another Islamic caliphate, like in Idlib, like in Raqqa.
Mhm.
And people have to live in fear all their lives to express their identity or go to prayer. And it will
Well,
become like
come on, man.
any...
Come on, man. Why the news media why they don't want to tell you that? I told y'all. No, if they find your ass as a Christian, you better cross over right now to Islam, be they servant, or you dead on the spot. These the people they calling rebels and they praising on mainstream media. That shit is disgusting and disrespectful as hell. I told y'all Putin was protecting the Christians, but Assad, who is the leader of Syria, protects them as well. You can be a Christian under Assad. A lot of these other Islamic nations, you can't be one. You know, but these are the people. Like I said, Gaddafi, another person, you could be a Christian, no problem. Saddam, you could be a Christian, no problem. These are the people they want to overthrow and kill, jeopardizing everybody else.
Tora Bora situation, right, in Aleppo. So even if they're not killing them now directly, they will be completely eliminated from the society and they have to live in always fear and agony. Second thing that these people do not understand, that the Nusra provided more electricity to the city at the current moment, not because they love the people, because the industrial cities in Aleppo is shut down. Like the people have closed their industries and their factories and they escaped. And because the government has prioritized the production and industries so that the economy turns around again, that's why the people, ordinary people, had less electricity in the city, but more electricity on the suburbs of Aleppo where there were the factories. So all these so-called pundits do not understand what they're talking about. And they are giving this, they're whitewashing a terrorist group which has a track record of persecution and killing of the Christians and the minorities. And we have countless of stories which came from Idlib, how they ethnically cleansed the Christians in different towns like Yaqubiya, like in Kesab. I will tell your audience a story. I received an exclusive story, this was in 2019, from a source in Idlib telling me that these Nusra militants, they raped an Armenian woman and then they stoned her to death. Like they raped her and then they accused her of adultery and then stoned her to death. I couldn't believe the story because it looked so even beyond my comprehension. Why would they rape her and then they stone her to death? They could have just killed her with a gun, right? But no, they killed her in the most sadistic way. Now I have name, I have a picture of the woman and everything, so we confirmed the story. So I broke the story, and this was in 2019. And in 2022, I was in Armenia, Yerevan, and I was in a restaurant. All of a sudden, a man in his mid-50s comes and he hugs me and starts crying. And I don't know who is this person. And it turned out that he's the brother of this woman who was raped and killed by these Nusra militants in Idlib, and he now lives in Armenia, in Yerevan. And he told me, Kev, you were the only person who kept the memory of my sister who was murdered in this most heinous way. So we have countless other stories like this. Therefore, you can say and be honest. You support al-Nusra. It's okay. You support al-Nusra. You support their way of life. You support how they operate Idlib. You support the caliphate. Be honest, but don't whitewash. These people, rebranding them to other names, it doesn't change the core. Like I receive comments, people objecting from these think tanks and telling me, but it's no longer al-Nusra because somewhere in Tora Bora, where they have a headquarters, they have cut ties with them. It's like, do they really think we're full? Because at the end, the Al-Qaeda, when we say Al-Qaeda, we're not talking about an organization. We're talking about an ideology. We're talking about a practice, political practice, religious practice, sectarian practice of these people. And there is no difference between al-Nusra and HTS. They didn't develop somehow into a different species and became like moderate now and they're respecting human rights. No, that's not the case. So those who are supporting al-Nusra or whitewashing them, I think they are giving a very big disservice to the people in Aleppo.
Funnily enough, it's the same way they whitewashed Azov, as our mod Jenny just mentioned, just like they did with Azov. But the reason why I brought up that funny video of the Christmas tree is because I really wanted to talk about a population that maybe doesn't get talked about very much, that I know is near and dear to you, and we've been trying to focus on it, at least on Twitter Spaces. But I want to talk about the Armenians of Aleppo. But one second. So I wanted you to kind of talk about that community. I included the first part. It might have looked a little violent, but they were commemorating the Armenian genocide, and I thought that was important.
This is the school that I studied, by the way. This is my school.
Is it? Oh my God! Yeah, I wanted. It looked a little bit iffy, but I wanted to show that.
I need to hide. I need to hide my tears now somewhere.
That's so nice. I didn't realize. Oh my gosh! But they were commemorating the Armenian genocide. So I wanted to include that. That's something that Armenians don't often get to commemorate, and they're such a large diaspora community, one of the largest in the world. And so that, and they're in Aleppo. And I also wanted to include the fact that I think there was a school that was supporting Assad. Why do the Syrian Armenians of Aleppo support Assad so vehemently? I know you've spoken to your family and friends there. How are they doing? You said they were scared. I know it's a tight-knit and very vibrant community. What's left of it in Aleppo, et cetera, et cetera.
The Armenians in Aleppo, they are the descendants of the survivors of the Armenian genocide. The vast majority of them, they arrived in Aleppo like my grandparents in Aleppo after the genocide, because Armenians had presence in Syria even before the genocide. Many people do not know this, but their presence even goes before the presence of the Arabs in the Levant. And there was the empire of Dikran the Great, even before Christianity, and they arrived to Syria. Now, There were many Armenians in Syria, Aleppo. There was Zor, Qamishli, Hasake, Damascus, Beirut, and unfortunately speaking, also many of them either migrated before the conflicts or they have been forced to leave. And what happened is Syria in 2011 had around 120,000 Armenians. Most of them were in Aleppo. Now the number decreased 90% before this attack on Aleppo. So if before the attack, this recent attack on Aleppo, there were how many? 12, 13, 14, 15,000 Armenians left. Imagine how many has left now after this second attack. The estimates of Al-Mayadeen is 1 million civilians escaped Aleppo in the past few days after the attack. So of 3.5 million civilians, 1 million people left the city. And this also tells you something. If the Aleppis were receiving the people with the liberators, why would they escape the country? And I know the city, and I know countless number of friends in Aleppo. You cannot believe me how many friends we have. They were desperately posting on Facebook, only friends. If you have one place for me in your car, take me with you out of Aleppo. And there were many of them didn't find someone to take them out. And now the roads are blocked, so they cannot leave. I'm speaking to my friends and beloved ones in Aleppo on daily basis. I'm just kindly asking them to stay low profile and live their life normal. You know, like it's not like somebody was going to stop you in the street and say, oh, are you Christian or are you not? Because just life has to go on, you know? Don't show something that could provoke them, irritate them. But today, when I spoke to my friends and beloved ones in Aleppo, there is something strange happening in the city, and that is complete absence of the Nusra militants in the city. It's like they don't exist. We don't know if they are on the front lines. We don't know if they have some tactics. There is something strange happening in the city that there is no presence of the Nusra militants. So people are going to grocery or buy something, but unfortunately there is no bread and there is no fresh vegetables, meat and stuff because there is no supply. So what is going to happen now, Turkey has to send this stuff to Aleppo, and then they will introduce Turkish lira or dollar for them to start using, just like they do in Idlib and just like they do in Afrin, Azaz and the rest, Jarablos, the places they occupy. So for the Armenians, I think this is, I'm being very blatant, honest with you, you know, like Armenians had a very long historical presence there, and they have been genocided by the Ottomans, and they lost 1.5 million of 2 million during the persecution. Entire Eastern Anatolia today is ethnically cleansed from the Armenians, and some of them fled to Syria. And now it's just 100 years later, the new Ottoman of Erdogan is coming after them again. And this time they are slowly but surely ethnically cleansing them with the collaboration of certain Western governments, not in terms of the support to al-Nusra, but rather, this is something that many people do not know. Many Armenian and Christians left Syria to Beirut, to Lebanon, during 2012 and 2016. And during this time, only during this time, some certain Western governments like Australia and Canada, they opened a migration only for the Christians of Aleppo. And I have friends, relatives, family members now in Canada. The moment you arrive in Beirut and you apply for this NGO, which is a Christian NGO in Beirut, belonging to the Canadian, to some other Canadian NGOs, in 3 months, you are already in Canada. In 3 months, and not even with a refugee status. It's a resettlement program. You don't get a refugee status. So you're all of a sudden arriving with a resident permit and you can work and continue your life there. So it was a great opportunity for many people to leave. So I have many friends and relatives now in Canada.
Sure.
They left in between 2014 and 2016 to Canada, and they established new lives. And you think that these people will return after having babies, going to schools, universities. They have established businesses there. So this is how they emptied basically the
Yeah.
Christians of Syria through humanitarian work. Something that is very, very, instead of stopping the war, they took they took the Christians of Syria into Canada and into other places. And yeah, this is very horrible situation.
It's like ethnic cleansing, but through NGOs. Like
So
ethnic cleansing in a nice way, or
yeah,
ethnic cleansing with extra steps. I don't know.
yes,
It's progressive this AOC version of ethnic cleansing. It's the nice kind, I guess.
yes, yes, indeed. Very, 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 very sad. Actually, I don't think that. I mean, I have a family and friends, and I really don't know what to tell them now. Like they left Aleppo, they're in Latakia, Damascus. I really don't know what to tell them. Like, is it possible to go back even after liberation? Is it possible for them to restart lives? How many times somebody can restart a life? Like for someone who hasn't lived the war, this could like just sound like a phrase, but for us, our shops have been destroyed once, we and looted, and we reconstructed, and we bought again, and now it's destroyed again. Like how many times somebody can restart a life? And especially like if your parents have grown up and they can't, like they don't have the same energy to restart a business, right? So yeah, like I would be very happy to see Aleppo liberated again, and I would definitely visit it again. And this is not a secret. I was in Aleppo recently, and I think that I can't go any longer with in the presence of these militants in the country. If they see my face or my beard, they would. I think they would enjoy me on a barbecue grill. Really.
The beard would be a giveaway. But
Yeah.
I mean, your words are very touching. It's we heard very similar sentiments from our brothers and sisters in Lebanon. We had Marwa Osman on, and we're talking about having to start over again, and the significance of that. And as I'm kind of thinking about this, I wanted to zoom out a little bit because we've been hearing a ton of propaganda from the West in social media, people who are ostensibly pro-Palestine, saying that, oh, if you're against Israel and their barbarity, then you should also be against Bashar al-Assad, which is just ridiculous. And then in the institutionalized form, we see major news organizations like Al Jazeera, Middle East Eye. They've been covering, of course, in detail the genocide on Gaza, and outlets like Al Jazeera have even been calling it, in many cases, a genocide. But then at the same time, you'll see this consistent demonization of Bashar al-Assad. You'll see a consistent criticism of Russia and siding with Ukraine. So, there's a lot of confusion in the West, in the Western mind about Assad, even among these liberals who hold a level of sympathy toward Palestine. For the most part, you'll have people believing these demon theories. So could you break this down a little bit for us? Where is this coming from? Why are these major outlets like Al Jazeera pushing these narratives? And could you maybe clarify a little bit Syria's role in the axis of resistance in supporting the Palestinian resistance?
I remember in the past when the left wing was all about anti-imperialism and fighting against the colonialism, and especially in our region. Just like in the West, the left in the region has been infiltrated and destroyed by Qatari money. Qatar has poisoned the left into extent that it's impossible nowadays to have a rational discussion about what's happening in Syria. Because, and this is a copy of what George Soros does in other communities and other forces, basically, NGOs. It's all about now identity politics, and it's about feminism, LGBT, even in Syria, right? And they talk about this democracy that is going to uplift us from our ashes. This is how they believe things work. But when you show them the example of China, for example, you don't really need liberal democracy to be advanced. Technologically, economically, you only need for the people to agree on certain principles and to have a strong government that is managing well the economic, let's say, advancement in the country. Unfortunately speaking, in Syria, the government is like, I used to think in the past that they're just they know better. Now I truly think that there are so many incompetent people in Syria that gives Al Jazeera the window to jump inside the Syrian society, and these mistakes are repeated and they are unforgivable, because many locations in Syria fell now due to Al Jazeera's psychological operations against the people and how they spread fear among even the army soldiers. Whereas the Syrian army, the Syrian TV, they were showing how the penguins multiply, right? Like, it's like there is no way to compare the strength of the media strength of Al Jazeera with what Syrian state TV does. And we, on alternative media, we have done better job than entire state TV. Like, I can do better from my bathroom than an entire ministry of information in Syria, right? And this is not funny, like, it's
I
like,
feel that way
why,
about a lot of countries. I'm like, just hire us, please.
yeah, why? Like, we have so many talents. The problem is, even if we have talents, it's like institutionalized corruption that it's like everybody becomes one of them, when they join the institution. So we have so many talents that they lose themselves among the tide is very strong. Anyways, what Al Jazeera does, so basically they convinced many people, and we're talking of tens of millions of people in between Qatar to Mauritania, that the liberation of the people from the authoritarian regimes, how they describe it, is the formula for them to become like the West. Right. If you want to become like the West, you have all this advancement, all these technologies, all these beautiful things that they have. Then you have to get rid of Assad, and then you will become like them. But what's happened in Europe is a process of natural development during the historical cycles that they led them into this type of governance system in Europe or in the United States. In Syria, people can, I don't know how they forget it, but since 1,400 years, since the inception of Islam in the region, not a single country or community established such an electoral, let's say, system or a democratic system based on the elections that the people are calling for nowadays. And I'm not saying necessarily this is a bad thing. I'm saying that for 1,400 years, the people didn't practice this. And then we had 400 years of Ottoman occupation of Syria, which left the people completely, let's say, their natural, social, and human development has been frozen during this time. So we can't really underestimate the impact of history on the Levant in, let's say, West Asia, and why they have certain types of political systems there. Now, if we want to get rid of all authoritarian regimes in the region, I think we should start with Qatar, because Qatar is not a democracy. Qatar doesn't have a constitution, and surely it's not the emir of Qatar who is asking the people who they want to be the ruler of their country. Is just giving to his son again, right? It's the same in every country, especially in the region, but some of them are more blunt than others. So I don't understand why it has to be, this style has to be copied in Syria, but not in Qatar itself. But Qatar is more than that. Qatar is, I think, the biggest PSYOP in the region is Al Jazeera. And when I say the biggest, there are multiple of them, but Al Jazeera is the strongest one. Al Jazeera is basically, if you see the inception of Al Jazeera, the first people who started Al Jazeera, they were the BBC journalists. And this was based on a more British journalism style than any other types of journalism. And what they basically were foreseeing or planning on, the moment Al Jazeera started, they presented for the first time solid, brilliant, professional journalism. The Arab world has not seen a journalistic work like Al Jazeera. They have presented to us amazing news segments, great documentaries, and amazing war coverage. But all this was aimed at gaining the trust of the people, especially through the gate of Palestine. Palestine was the center of this. And once you cover the Palestine case in a positive way, from the perception of the Arabic people, you already have the trust of hundreds of millions of people. Now, imagine if you have brilliant journalists in Gaza covering the war and they're getting killed, and Al Jazeera as an institution gaining more credibility because they're targeted and they are coming after Al Jazeera. But what Al Jazeera does basically on a more higher level in the hierarchy is that they see this as a collateral damage for them. They don't care about the journalists getting killed in Al Jazeera. They see them as a collateral damage for the sake of the strategic purpose of Qatar. And that is to hit the players that who give tangible support to the Palestinians. And in this case, we're talking about Syria, Hezbollah, Iran, and Yemenis and the Iraqis. In every place except for Palestine, every player which gives tangible support to the Palestinians, Al Jazeera is working to destabilize their country or trying to psyop their people or trying to regime change and coup d'etats. It's a very dirty game what they do in the region. And now you see all the Al Jazeera journalists accompanying with the Nusra Front. Middle East Eye journalist is making live streamings in front of the Aleppo.
The massive ambushes being conducted by the Palestinian resistance, primarily Al-Qassam brigades, but also Saraya al-Quds, both armed wing of Hamas and the PIJ, against the genocide forces wreaking havoc and destruction and barbarism in Gaza. The following thing that I wanted to be talking to you about is the important developments that are happening on the Syrian front. Every single day, by the hour, we have more and more updates. And now it appears to be that we are having a strike from the Syrian government and its backers against the advancement of the armed Syrian opposition, and what all of that means alongside the developments that are happening on the diplomatic side, trying to resolve matters when it comes to Syria. But we're going to start off with this here, Al-Qassam brigades and Saraya al-Quds, but this video was released by Al-Qassam brigades, the armed wing of Hamas, taking action against the genocide forces in Rafah. Now, mind you, Rafah is an area that the genocide forces have been in for over 8 months now. Benjamin Netanyahu said he dismantled the brigades in Rafah, that he destroyed all of the tunnels, that they basically got rid of them. However, it appears to be that these resistance forces in Rafah are still exceptionally active. So in this operation that was conducted several days back and Al-Qassam released today, they usually have a bit of a delay sometimes when it comes to publishing the videos due to security purposes and things that are on the ground. And they called it the operation for, as in paying back for the blood of the martyr Yahya Sinwar. So this attack, it had 3 ambushes. This is the first ambush, right? This is the first ambush coming from the Palestinian resistance. They had 3 ambushes, one against tanks, one against the D9 bulldozers that destroys buildings, and the other one, a sniper shooting genocide soldiers inside of Rafah. In the eastern part of Rafah, it's called the Junaina neighborhood. And these are the Egyptian borders here. So the Palestinian resistance published this attack, and this is the location. This is one of their snipers here conducting these attacks against some of the genocide soldiers in Gaza. And I'll let you watch some of it with the audio here.
وعند الوصول قوات مجدر العدو يقوم وليد بقطع النجدات عن منطقة المقتلة البلدي التوثيق والسداد بتقدموا باتجاه الشمال الغربي من منطقة المسلخ، والحين بشوف قديش العدد وببلغك. تمام. هاي الآليات وصل محيط البرج. تمام. هاي نقرب نوصل لك هنا نوصل لنا. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر كمل الله أكبر ولله الحمد الله أكبر الله أكبر الحمد لله الحمد لله الله في سبيل التراب يا رب يا رب وكان الله الله أكبر الحق كان الله الله أكبر الحق توكل على الله توكل على الله الله أكبر توكل على الله الله أكبر ولله الحمد ثلاثة أربعة مصورين خمسة ستة الله أكبر ولله الحمد
So this was a summary of these operations that the Palestinian resistance carried out several days back against the genocide forces in Gaza several days ago, and that they just published today, and that is in Rafah. That is in the eastern part of Rafah, an area that again Israel said that it controlled completely several months back, and they said that they also dismantled the final brigades of the Hamas forces, or their armed wing, in that part in Gaza several months back. And again, we are having these footages coming from these areas specifically, not only when it comes to Al-Qassam brigades, but for other resistance movements in Gaza as well. That indicates that, like in the north, and the north is more hardly hit than the south, we were still seeing images coming from the south targeting Israel at levels that are not less complicated and intense than those being conducted in the north. And what does that all mean when we're talking about this hopeful situation when it comes to a ceasefire? That means a couple of things. That firstly, the approach towards a ceasefire wouldn't have taken place altogether if it wasn't for the genocide forces in Gaza still getting hit and targeted by the Palestinian resistance. If they had no resistance in Gaza, they wouldn't call or require ceasefire. They would simply continue to forcibly expel the population and complete or try to complete the ethnic cleansing campaign through continued massacres and starvation and barbarism in sadistic ways that we haven't witnessed previously in history, and got the deal done. Simple. They have plans to settle in Gaza. They're trying their luck when it comes to these plans. And if they had no armed resistance in Gaza, well, they would have implemented those plans from a very long time ago. So the first reason is, well, we're still facing resistance on the ground, and that's why they are going towards the negotiations. The second thing is, well, the Palestinian side, they are not stopping these armed resistance against this genocide army in Gaza for the sake of these negotiations. So although yesterday we were speaking about new mediators coming in the picture, Russia becoming more involved and potentially being a mediator after we have a ceasefire, more talks, the delegation in Egypt, in Israel, and likewise Israeli delegations in Egypt, more statements coming from the representatives of Hamas who are representing the Palestinian side when it comes to the negotiations, and their talks about more communication to do with the ceasefire and the prospect of having a ceasefire. And again, nothing confirmed. And even if we do have a ceasefire can be broken, like the very fragile ceasefire that we have with Lebanon and Israel at the moment. So the Palestinian resistance is still there, it's still ongoing, it's still strong, and there is no sign of them backing down or stopping anytime soon. That's the first thing. The second thing, Ansarullah in Yemen, they targeted the genocide state with Palestine 2 missiles. Palestine 2 missiles are hypersonic missiles that can reach, well, to beyond Israel, really. And that's not the first time that they're targeted. They said we target the strategic location inside of the occupied territories with a Palestine 2 hypersonic missile, and that they also targeted a US destroyer and 3 supporting ships that belong to the US Navy in the Arab Sea and the Gulf of Aden with 16 ballistic missiles and UAVs and cruise missiles as well. This statement came earlier on from the spokesperson of Ansarullah, Yahya Sari'. He had the statement earlier on in which he declared all of this operation and the fact that they are still continuing their operations against Israel up until we have a ceasefire with Gaza and the siege is lifted on Gaza. A couple of days ago, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, the leader of Ansarullah, he said that he congratulated Lebanon on their victory on Israel, the Lebanese resistance, but he said that there is no ceasefire with Yemen and Israel. Likewise with the Iraqi resistance movements, they said there is no ceasefire between us and Israel, and this is another sign that the war hasn't stopped, and the only ceasefire when it comes to the confrontation comes only from Lebanon, although we still have ongoing tensions and recorded breaches that Israel is conducting not only on the borders but also inside of Lebanese territories deep into Lebanon. Some of these breaches were recorded in Beirut. So that's the second thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Important developments coming from Ansarullah targeting the genocide coalition that is supporting Israel in the Red Sea, and also targeting the genocide state itself with a Palestine 2 or Palestine 2 ballistic missile. Which leads us to the third thing that I wanted to talk to you about. We've been talking about and covering the developments in Syria for the past couple of days, and they are indeed developing very, very quickly. We had a confirmation coming from the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, they're called, the from the administration of the liberated areas, as they call it, that their leader, Al-Julani, was killed in a strike on their headquarters that took place in Idlib by the Russian Air Force. They call it the Russian-Syrian Air Force, because the Russian and Syrian Air Forces, they conduct joint operations inside of Syria, and yesterday they decided to target the leader of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, they're called the Committee to Liberate the Levant in English, that are conducting this operation in northeast Syria that is now stretching down to Hama. Now, with regards to Hama, there are conflicting reports. Hama is quite a distance from Aleppo, Hama, and you're getting closer to the central parts of Syria, closer to the borders with Lebanon. There were reports that the armed opposition reached those areas. Other reports confirming that no, we are also facing confrontation by the Syrian army against those movements in those areas. Today, the Iranian foreign minister was in Syria. The foreign minister was in Syria after a planned visit that we spoke about yesterday, during which he spoke with the president, of Syria, Bashar al-Assad. So we had this report here in Al-Mayadeen saying the Iranian foreign minister Abbas Araghchi has arrived in Damascus and he affirms solidarity with Syria, unwavering support for Syria amid the activation of foreign-backed takfiri terrorist groups in the country. This is the terminology being used by them. Araghchi and his delegation arrived in the Syrian capital on Sunday to deliver a message of steadfast support for the Syrian army and government from Tehran based on what he told reporters before departing. He emphasized that Iran sees no difference between the Israeli regime and takfiri terrorists, stating that we believe that following the Israeli regime's failures, the enemy is trying to implement its sinister goals of spreading insecurity in the region via the same terrorist groups. Araghchi expressed confidence that, based on precedents, the Syrian army would prevail against these groups. This comes as terrorist units advance southward towards the city of Hama, showcasing that a coordinated counterattack by the Syrian army appears to be taking shape. Now, a note here, based on precedents, that is indeed correct. In previous times, there were advancements when it comes to the Syrian opposition and the armed groups towards many parts of Syria, but they later retreated. They were targeted, they were confronted, and they had to retreat eventually when they faced proper opposition. And usually when it comes to the situation in Syria, we've seen many cases of tactical retreat from the government forces and their backers and their supporters, following which they had taken these areas back. And when it comes to the actual armed opposition conducting this operation in Syria, there is no physical vision or physical evidence to support the fact that they would be able to establish themselves properly in those locations that they were in. And in some of these locations, like Aleppo, for example, there were Syrian forces that retreated, but not like massive numbers of Syrian forces because the situation was pretty safe. And we were in the middle of a peace process, talking about more de-escalation. And also, we were expecting more de-escalation following the statements coming from Turkey and from Syria as well, that they will be sitting down, they will be potentially sitting down and talking to each other to try and resolve matters. So clearly there's a strike back coming from the Syrian side. And also, there is a meeting that is due to take place between the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Turkey. Turkey, he might meet with Erdogan himself, or he might meet with the foreign minister too. Both of them are very much heavily involved in what's happening in Syria. Now, his tone with Turkey, because you know, they always have ties, but there's always tensions between Iran and Turkey. His tone could be one of the two. He would either be threatening Turkey from continuing this operation and, you know, warning them that they might receive more severe blows than they could have imagined, because previously, even in talks that happened in Astana and Sochi, Turkey always insisted on having these autonomous regions in the northwestern part of Syria, of Syria, and sometimes they tried to exclude them. However, the general agreement spoke about general de-escalation when it comes to these areas. So Iran and backing the Syrian government, and of course Russia too, anyone supporting the Syrian government, they might be conducting attacks deeper into these territories. And the assassination strike that happened against the leader of one of the armed opposition movements in those areas came in Idlib. That's an area that they have been controlling for a while. That's been under their control, closer to the Turkish borders. And that also was trying to send a message to Turkey and these movements that, well, you know, we've retreated tactically here, but that doesn't mean you're not going to be met with a fierce response. And before you think of advancing further, think again when it comes to the areas that you are in. And again, Turkey might cooperate in a positive manner with Iran. So far, they're trying to deny that they have any involvement, which is, you know, I'm not sure how to describe that, you know, the Turkish denial when it comes to their involvement with these armed movements. I mean, talking about people who have been trained, armed in Turkey. They've been allowed by Turkey to do that. As a matter of fact, there is no genuine reason on the ground or benefit for Turkey, who's backing these movements now, from this operation. And I'll tell you why. Because Turkey, the publicly known information coming from Turkey, the general theme is that their presence there is primarily against the Kurdish movements. This attack that's happening by the Turkish-backed, and when we talk about Turkey is in the NATO is the US and Israel, all of that, you know, they're all together, you know. This operation
I'm on it.
hasn't gone anywhere near the Kurdish
I even
areas
dropped
or the
the mic,
Kurdish-controlled areas. The Kurdish movements, the Democratic Syria Forces, or parties aligned with the PKK, they're in the northeast. If Turkey's operation was primarily worried about that, well, then why didn't you go towards the east? Why are you going down Aleppo, Hama, Homs, and to Damascus and declaring that you all of a sudden want to liberate Syria? Well, where did that exactly come from now? Why the M5? Why the strategic lifeline from Syria to Lebanon? And why now? You see, all of these moves are extremely suspicious, and it's not convincing coming from Turkey to say that they are not involved or that they have nothing to do with it, because these people, firstly, are backed by them and trained by them. And the operation that they're conducting and the fact that it's not in line with the declared worries of Turkey in Syria, which is the Kurds, well, leads us to establish the fact that this campaign is primarily by Israel and the United States. No one else. It's for the sake of them. If the movements that they are backing, and Turkey has enough leverage on all of these movements to prevent them from doing anything, to force retreat, or to ask them to conduct an operation, they have the leverage on them because of the level of support on them. If they are enabling this operation that is happening on the strategic lifeline between Syria and Hezbollah and Lebanon, that means that this operation is 100% made in Israel and the United States. Absolutely 100%. Because they are supported by Turkey, and the operation isn't targeting the side that Turkey claims to be present or supporting parties in that area to deter, who are the Kurdish movements. They haven't touched them. As a matter of fact, they tactically started to coordinate with the Syrian government against this advancement of these forces. That means some of the Kurdish movements came west from the northeastern part of Syria, excuse me. All of these things prove that this operation is genuinely for the sake of Israel and the United States. There is no other explanation. And it came 15 hours after Netanyahu warned Syria. And it came exactly after the ceasefire. And after Israel was forced to have this ceasefire following repeated blows from Hezbollah, who are receiving the majority of their missiles through Syria. Is there any other explanation? If someone else has another explanation, tell me. So, when we have more reports, and we're due to get more reports coming from the meeting of Arakshi and the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, we're going to cover these. And we're also anticipating his meetings with the Turkish side. Let's hope that they try and reach a peaceful resolution here and focus on resolving internal matters in a diplomatic way, because like I said, we had a peace process, we had a long ceasefire in those areas for a while. This operation came out of the blues, really, but not out of the blues from the sides who were behind this operation. That was indeed enabled by Turkey too. And there is a prospect of them reaching a solution with Turkey, but there is also another opportunity, and that opportunity is having a really big campaign that could take some time when it comes to Syria. There was a report, by the way, coming from Germany, that Iran now has the Sukhoi 35. Iran receives 2 Sukhoi 35 SE from Russia. They only said that they received 2. Now, mind you, there were also previous reports that Iran got the Sukhoi 35 from, according to the German media outlet Flug Review, the handover took place in a private ceremony in the Komsomolsk on Amur aircraft manufacturing facility in Russia, in Russia's Far East. And they said that they received their first 2 Su-35 SE fighter jets on November the 18th, something that is signaling that we will be having more. According to the German media outlet Flug Review, the handover took place in a private ceremony. The 2 fighter jets were disassembled into several parts and transported to Tehran's Mahrabad Airport using a Russian military Antonov AN-124-100 transport aircraft. Upon arrival in Tehran, the components were transferred to an airbase in Hamadan for reassembly, marking Iran's acquisition of its first 4.5 generation fighter jets. These jets are expected to modernize Iran's air force, which has relied on aging aircraft since the era of the Shah. Now, this is very, very important. I mean, especially with the fact that Iran, when it comes to air force, that's not considered their strategic weapon. And I don't think even with the arrival of the Su-35s or 35 SEs that the Air Force will become their strategic weapons. The strategic weapons of Iran in the short and medium terms will remain the missiles. They've decided that that's their strategic weapon. But this is a very, very important development, especially with the fact that their fighter jets are extremely old. I mean, you're talking about F-14 Tomcat, F-4. That's extremely old, and that would be a massive push for Iran. And that also signals the level of coordination coming from Russia with Iran. And we're also expected to hear about a very important development when it comes to an agreement. Some said it will be a defense pact between Iran and Russia.
Mother of all talk shows. I'm a great fan of your work, as you know, but I thought your master class with Tucker Carlson before the presidential election was just that, a real masterpiece. You found the words to puncture the pompous hypocrites of liberalism and the liberal incarnation that is the Democratic Party. Nothing liberal about these people at all, is there? They're tyrants. They support tyranny. They support everything that they once claimed to be against. And I thought that you and Tucker made quite a double act. One from the left, one from the right. You punched them so hard, I felt that somebody was flapping a white towel in the corner saying, okay, leave us alone. We've taken enough punishment.
Well, it's good to be back with you, George. I'm anxious to look up what insalubrious means. But there's nothing about the liberal class that is liberal anymore. They are the illiberal class. I'm a liberal because I'm anti-war. I'm anti-authoritarian. I'm anti-censorship. I'm pro-bodily autonomy. These are all values that was what made me a liberal. And in the last 4 to 8 years, they've gotten rid of all those things that we used to be suspicious and critical of big pharma and corporations and the intelligence community, the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and the war machine. That all flipped, and all it took was for the election of Donald Trump in 2016, and they started to repeat the CIA talking points, and they started to look at people inside the FBI as their heroes. And if you don't know, the FBI is famous and for traditionally infiltrating any left-wing organization and dividing and conquering them and splitting them up. And so it was a very sad thing to see. Yes, you're right. They are not liberal. If you're for, as Bobby Kennedy says, when in history was the people who were doing the censoring ever the good guys or ever on the right side of an issue? And so they're all very pro, and they do it under the guise of, well, we have to stop hate speech. We don't like hate speech. What they actually hate is speech. That's because the antidote to bad speech is good speech, not censorship. And so that's just another way to control everybody, and because then who gets to decide what's hate speech and what's not hate speech? And by the way, why can't I hate something? Since when is that a new rule that I don't get the same right as my fourth grade nephew? He gets to hate stuff. Why can't I hate White Guy Taco Tuesday? They put mayonnaise and turkey inside that. That's an abomination to God. So yes, I appreciate the compliments on my Tucker. What the point I wanted to make more than anything, because I've had these conversations with people who I've known for 30 years in Hollywood who claim to be liberal, and they were doing everything they could to make sure Kamala Harris got elected. And I was like, so it doesn't bother you that she's literally funding a genocide? That this whole thing that you said that Donald Trump is Hitler and he's bad for everybody and he's a madman. You don't mind that the person who you think is the grown-up in the room is doing a literal genocide right in front of your eyes at the behest of a foreign country, and they didn't have anything back to say. And I'm like, you got to make them pay a price. They go, well, Trump won't be any better. I'm like, well, if Trump gets elected, then we'll deal with Trump then. And I won't give him my vote either. So how dare you? So what they're actually doing was they're prioritizing what they consider to be gay rights or immigrant rights, migrant worker rights in front of the Palestinian genocide. And that's what they're willing to make that bargain, which is, evil. And so I think they're wrong about all the stuff, right? Gay rights and Donald Trump was the first president in the history of the United States to enter the White House pro-gay marriage. He hosts gay marriages at his house in Mar-a-Lago all the time. So again, it was mostly built on fear and propaganda, and they swallow it. The liberals used to always be skeptical of government. As we all know, the biggest liars are the government. Second is the corporate media. And third, and a distant third, is randos on social media. But what they want you to focus on is the randos on social media, because the establishment can't afford to lose control of the narrative. And because if they lose control of the narrative, then the game's over and they have to start disappearing people, which they do, but it's a lot harder, and it's a lot harder to keep control. And I'm surprised to hear that you're still on TikTok. I've gotten kicked off TikTok, and so it's just a matter of time before you do.
Well, we're a bit more moderate than you. On the subject of insalubrious cafes, you told Tucker that you don't go to dinner parties. Neither do I. But I've spent my life in insalubrious cafes, and therefore I know that the price of a cup of tea there is eminently manageable by most people, and that's all we charge for our Patreon. Hate works, as you said to Tucker Carlson. They generated hate against Donald Trump, to whom I'll come in a minute in more detail, but on entirely bogus affairs. It always struck me that the idea that Donald Trump was homophobic was very unlikely to be true. He's a party guy. He's a club guy. He's a New York guy. He has gay weddings in his house kind of guy. But that casual smear, once cast, finds a lot of places to rest and precludes those who rightly guard their credentials on gay rights from actually looking beyond what has now just been alleged. The idea that Trump hates blacks, hates Latinos, is belied by the steady advance across 8 years, 3 elections, that Trump, the candidate, has made amongst Latino and black voters. Why are these Latino and black voters voting for Trump? Because he hates them? What kind of foolishness is this? But on the subject of the liars, Jimmy, I was particularly grabbed by the point that you made, that they put up people that you think wouldn't lie to you. And one of the examples that stands out in my brain is Rachel Maddow. She's a lesbian, right? So she wouldn't lie to you. Gay people wouldn't lie to you. Then they tell us a woman wouldn't lie to us. Then they tell us a black woman wouldn't lie to us. It's really rather sinister. This whole lie machine is very carefully calibrated. They handpick these people very carefully indeed.
Yes, it's the corporate version of identity politics. I like to make the case that Rachel Maddow, people think, well, well, she's gay, so she's just automatically virtuous, and so gay people wouldn't lie. And then the person who comes on after her is Chris Hayes, who's a verified nerd with the glasses and the whole deal, and nerds wouldn't lie to you. So, and then they have Joyanne Reed, who's a woman of color. They wouldn't lie, of course. Those are the people they handpick. Of course, those are the people who are going to lie to you. And it tricks a lot of people and it fools a lot of people. And that's what identity politics is all about. And you have to remember that the biggest thing that scares the oligarchy is for people to come together along economic issues. And it's been ever since World War II, at least here in the United States, that any social movement that included a class analysis and an economic component was infiltrated, and they immediately decoupled the economic issues from the cultural issues, and they pushed the cultural issues. Like when the Vietnam War in the United States was happening, the protesters were very normal middle-class people with button-down shirts on and nice haircuts, and then they infused the hippies, and they're like, oh, it's the smelly, dirty, drug addict people, the Charlie Manson types that are against the war. So that's the trick that they play, and they're doing it all the time right now. They want us to focus on race. They want us to focus on our gender. They want us to focus on our sexuality. They want us to focus on transgenderism. They want us to focus on our ethnicity. And that's all they want us to focus on. The most important thing in the world is the color of your skin. It's not. As Martin Luther King said, we should judge a man by the content of his character, not by the color of his skin. And we can then come together economically around shared ideas, which is what's happening right now across the globe. There's worldwide protests for unions against Amazon, which we only have one here in the United States, which was started by a black guy on Staten Island in New York. And what makes that particularly noteworthy is that Staten Island is known to be the home of a lot of Trump voters, a lot of white blue-collar workers, and they were organized by a black guy named Christian Smalls because they came together around a shared value, shared interest, and those were around economics. And then, because that's the only thing that scares the oligarchy, is if people on the left, right, and the middle put down their cultural baggage and come together around economic ideas to oppose the oppressor, which is the oligarchy. And that's the only thing, they did it. I like to say in every one of my shows, when I do a stand-up show, which I was just in Europe earlier this year, and it's nice to know that the people like my message there. It went over very well. And I say that the only thing, they did a controlled demolition of our economy during COVID, which flattened everybody except a handful of millionaires and billionaires. And they want me to hate my neighbor for the economic pain I'm feeling because my neighbor wouldn't take a vaccine that didn't work the way they said it did in the first place. Well, I'm not going to hate my neighbor. I'm going to love my neighbor and join with my neighbor because they're hurting under the same oppression as I am. And that's the only thing that could save us right now in the Western world. So that's my message. And the liberal class is not liberal. They're illiberal. There's a great book by Thomas Frank called Listen Liberal. And that kind of radicalized me. I read that in 2016, and it woke me up to how far from our values the Democratic Party and the liberal class have slipped and shifted. They're not liberal. We have two right-wing parties in the United States, and the reason why they, when they did Russiagate against Donald Trump, it was because he ran as an anti-interventionist and he wanted to end the foreign wars. In fact, the generals, we now find out, and the Pentagon lied to Donald Trump about the number of troop levels inside Syria because he wanted to pull them out, and they kept lying and saying they were less than there really was, which to me, that's a treasonous offense. And it's funny that they always have to make up stuff. If Donald Trump is such a monster and a Hitler, why do you got to make up stuff like Russiagate, which was a complete fabrication from the intelligence community, the CIA, the FBI, and the Hillary Clinton campaign, which funded the Steele dossier, which started the whole thing. And then they lied about funding it for a year. No crime, no punishment for them. They get a slap on the wrist for lying to the FBI and the country about that. And so here we are. The Mueller report came in. I thought people would stop being fixated on Russia and it didn't stop them. So this war in Ukraine has been in the chamber for at least a decade or two. They've been wanting to have this war in Ukraine, and what do they want to do? They want to balkanize it and sell it off, which they're doing right now. They're sold off half the farmland in Ukraine. It's already been sold off to places like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. And they thought that Russia was weaker than it was, and they would be able to do the same thing, that they would be able to smash Russia, hurt them economically, create a unrest, and then they could split it up and sell it off to the same vulture capitalists and the economic hitmen in the West that have been starting every war and continuing every war. And as Julian Assange taught us, these wars are not meant to be won. They're meant to be ongoing. So that's just another transfer of money from the U.S. Treasury to the international security state.
Well, look, we've left the Liberals bleeding on the floor. Let's turn momentarily, and I'm grateful for your time, to the Conservatives. As you say, and I'm the author of the phrase two cheeks of the same ass. It's true in Britain. It's true in the United States. We're no longer divided by a common language. We are increasingly confronting exactly the same set of circumstances, including that one. But there's a peculiarly evangelical flavor of some of the appointments that Donald Trump makes. Virtually none of the people I was hoping that he would appoint have been appointed. And the people I would have said, don't touch them with a barge pole, have gotten some of the plum positions. Secretary of State, little Marco Rubio, Huckabee, the country and Western evangelist, who believes in the red heifers and the rebuilding of the temple, who denies there is any such thing as a Palestinian, is now your ambassador in Jerusalem, which is only the capital in the eyes of Israel and the United States and nobody else. But that's where he is. Your defense secretary, he's even more barmy, and he's got his finger on the trigger. I mean, he's an end times guy. He's actively working for the rapture, for Armageddon. He's come to the right place for Armageddon, literally, in Palestine, in the Israel-Palestine conflict. If there's a coming struggle, Jimmy, for the ear of Donald Trump, how come we seem to be losing it so early when he's not even got his feet under the desk?
Yes, I was very disappointed in lots of his appointments. I was happy about Bobby Kennedy at the Health and Human Services. Tulsi Gabbard is certainly an upgrade, although she flip-flopped on her Israeli position, which seems to be the cost of entry into the Trump administration. The only thing we can hope is that Donald Trump is somehow going to force a solution and an end to the killing in Gaza and the West Bank. That's the only thing we can hope, is that he has a plan to force that end. I think that may happen, but his solution might not stop the tension. That's for sure. So all we can do is, I think it's prudent to wait and see what happens. I saw Glenn Greenwald do coverage of Marco Rubio and Trump's defense secretary, and what's interesting about Trump's defense secretary is that he doesn't come from the war machine. He's an outsider, and the fact that they're coming at him so hard. So to me, if the establishment hates a Trump appointee, that's a good sign. If they like him, like they like Marco Rubio, they like his Treasury Secretary pick, that's a bad sign. So they hated Bobby Kennedy and they're slandering him. And right now they have an email from Trump's Secretary of Defense from his mother that is in the New York Times. And it's like, well, they're really going after that guy. So there has to be, that's the only thing that gives me hope. I'm not saying that it's founded. I'm saying that when the establishment goes hard at someone like that, that means that there's something they fear about him, and it's not something that I fear. So I have my fingers crossed. We can only hope Trump is, the reason why it took him so long to impeach Trump is because the liberal class and the establishment had to find a crime he was guilty of that they were also complicit in. And they finally ended up impeaching him because he paused a shipment of weapons to Ukraine. Now, his appointment now, Glenn Greenwald, like I was saying, he talked about his appointment of Secretary Marco Rubio and the defense secretary. And he was saying that these people have shifted their global outlook as of late, and that they will be there to just fulfill the will of Donald Trump. Hopefully, fingers crossed, that's what he's doing. Now, the appointment of Kellogg as special envoy to the Ukraine also seems nuts. Who knows? Maybe it's, Donald Trump recently talked about how when he would have John Bolton over his shoulder when he went to negotiate, that the people he would be negotiating with would be afraid that, oh my God, this guy's a warmonger, so we better negotiate. So maybe that's, again, fingers crossed. All we could do is wait and see. I'm not happy about it, but Donald Trump has pledged to end the Ukraine war. We'll see, and if he doesn't, then we have to rally MAGA and his supporters to pressure him and to keep his campaign promises. But he has a history of being an anti-interventionist in more than the normal politician. Put it that way. He's certainly not a peacenik, but he likes to make deals and he wants credit for deals. And I've asked a lot of people, why do you think Donald Trump didn't start a new war during his first 4 years, even though the establishment was pressuring him to, right? And the best excuse I could get was that he's corrupt, but he's New York real estate corrupt. He's not neocon warmongering corrupt, slaughtering people for economic gain. And that's a big switch. He doesn't come from inside politics. He is an outsider. He doesn't have a history of coming up. He's not vetted by the establishment to be okay with the neocon war machine. And so, again, fingers crossed on that. And yeah, we definitely have to keep our eye on the ball and hold his feet to the fire.
Jimmy Dore, I take my hat off to you. Thanks for joining us on
will be in Los Angeles, Honolulu, Baltimore, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only jimmydore.com. So you know how they tell us that the Ukraine war is about liberating the people of Ukraine from the iron fist of Russia? Well, it looks like some people love Big Fist, but what I... But the wars, they're for morals and they're for values. That's what they tell us. But here's Lindsey Graham to tell you what they're really about. They're about the value of rare earth minerals, not about morals and values, but about money. Because whenever there's a war, there's a lot of economic interests that diverge, that come together. So here is Lindsey Graham going to tell you exactly why we're in Ukraine. And it's amazing how people who are Democrats still believe this lie about the Ukraine war, that we're there because Putin's a thug and we got to save the people of Ukraine. We are using the people of Ukraine as cannon fodder to enrich Western corporations. And
best money we ever spent.
Well, here we go. And he's going to let the cat out of the bag. Watch this.
Ukraine is still standing. This war is about Ukraine is still standing. This war is about money. People don't talk much about it, but the rich.
It's about money, y'all. People don't talk about money enough. I could take or leave the killing. My tummy's already full of blood. Now I'm craving some rare earth minerals.
I could peek at a dessert menu of minerals.
That little old rent boy Zelensky gonna give up them good minerals, y'all. Oh, here, watch this.
Dances. Ukraine is still standing. This war is about money. People don't talk much about it, but the richest country in all of Europe for rare earth minerals is Ukraine. $2 to $7 trillion worth of minerals that are rare earth minerals, very relevant to the 21st century. Ukraine's ready to do a deal with us, not the Russians. So it's in our interest to make sure that Russia doesn't take over the place. It's the breadbasket of really the developing world. 50% of all the food going to Africa comes out of Ukraine. We can make money and have an economic relationship with Ukraine that'd be very beneficial to us with peace. So Donald Trump's going to do a deal to get our money back, to enrich ourselves with rare earth minerals, a good deal for Ukraine and us, and he's going to bring peace. And Biden's been a disaster when it comes to containing bad guys.
So there,
Wow.
there it is. Wow, he just says
Wow.
it. He
The
just
ball's on Miss Lindsay.
he just says it. And they have stuff like lithium, they have stuff like titanium. Like they have some of the biggest reserves in the world of stuff
You
like
ever
that.
hear of Neptunium?
All
It's
this
very rare.
all the stuff that you need to make computer chips, the stuff you need to make cell phones and electric cars, and all that stuff is
I'm
in
getting
Ukraine.
excited.
That's right. Now China has cornered the market on that stuff, and so this again is another, and it's just this is just a proxy war for all that stuff. So if you think that we care about the Ukrainian people, you are the chump of all chumps, and you've learned nothing from Iraq, nothing from Iraq the first time, the second time, nothing from Libya, nothing from Syria, nothing from 20 years of occupation of Afghanistan. You've learned nothing.
Yes, I have, Jimmy. Get the minerals this time.
And it's amazing. People still think, and nobody will engage me in conversation. I have people DM me stuff about Ukraine, like that I've known for 25 years, like somehow I'm wrong about it. They're the most dumbest, easily propagandized people in the world are Democrat voters.
They're
People, you know
dumber
why
than
he's
North
talking?
Korea, Jimmy.
You know why he's talking about money on Fox News? Because the Fox News viewers aren't on board for the Ukraine war.
They like money, yeah.
So he's trying to convince them, look, it's all about money. It's gonna be good for us. That's why he's doing that.
Well, he's pretending he's like, I want a peace the whole time. I was just in it for the minerals.
Yep.
War, peace, as long as we get them minerals, y'all. That's all I'm saying.
My friend Afshin Ratanzi, who I just did his show, he said it wasn't about defending Ukraine's sovereignty. It wasn't about, I should say it like him. It wasn't about defending Ukraine's sovereignty. It wasn't about defending democracy. It was an economic proxy war to create a disaster for the United States vulture capitalists to pillage and exploit the resources of yet another country.
Yeah, this guy gets it. He's not disagreeing with Lindsay.
He's not.
Lindsay's on the same side.
No, he's just describing what Lindsey Graham's plan is. His job here. It was an economic proxy war, the Ukraine war, an economic proxy war by the United States and NATO to create a disaster, which is what it did. And so the U.S. vulture capitalists can come in and pillage and exploit the resources of yet another. They've already sold off half the farmland in Ukraine. This is about making it a profit for, who do you think? BlackRock?
All the good ones, yeah. Everything with black in the title.
That's right.
Blackstone, BlackRock.
All that lucrative money making that's going to help all of us, y'all.
BlackRock, Blackstone, Black Phillip, the satanic goat.
Here it is. BlackRock and JP Morgan are backing a $15 billion investor fund to rebuild Ukraine. Wow. Struggling American families are backing a $15 billion investor fund to rebuild Ukraine, laundered through BlackRock and JP Morgan. That's what the title of that article should be. It's amazing. Wow. Look at all that lucrative money making, y'all. Look at it. You got to remember, they're using our money. They don't have separate currency. What's that?
We're going to get the money. I mean, you're not going to get it
That's
back.
right.
We're
You're not.
gonna get it
That's
back.
right. It's going to go back to the people who own the politicians and the politicians.
Yeah. He says us like it somehow benefits anyone living here.
Here is Tucker Carlson with a guest on. Her name escapes me, but he's going to read a tweet of hers that tells you exactly what's happening in Ukraine.
So this is a tweet from me. I don't normally read people's tweets, but in standing with Ukraine, the Biden-Harris administration convinced them, Ukraine, to abandon a peace deal that would have ceded only half of the territory that Russia now occupies. And for that opportunity to lose twice as much of their homeland, they paid with tens of thousands of innocent lives. We did this to control the 11 trillion of minerals under the Donbass. We did it to grind down the Russian war machine on the grist of Ukrainian teenagers. We did it to hand out hundreds of billions of dollars to U.S. hedge funds who are, as we speak, carving up rights to Ukraine's fertile soil and vast mineral resources. The truth is the United States has never stood with the people of Ukraine. That is simply a jingle, an ad campaign broadcast to those who have never been there, designed to sell taxpayers on the appeal of prolonging war for profit. We have cost Ukraine her territory. We have cost Ukraine her children. The war hawks and the bankers are no friends to Ukraine.
Here's Lindsey Graham saying that we're going to fight to the last Ukrainian. Let's watch.
She just said what I've been saying.
Here's the strategy. Everybody in Ukraine's strategy is to fight to the last person. We finally have an ally.
We're going to fight to the last person.
Oh, not men anymore.
Right.
Pregnant women, they got to fight too.
I mean, not to the last one. You should save a couple of men, wink, wink, if you know what I'm talking about, right?
Hey,
come on.
Send a couple of them little old pregnant ladies and save a couple of men for me.
Seriously, though, we're killing off all their men to get some minerals, y'all.
We should rule with an oiled fist.
Fight. We haven't lost one American in the fight to liberate Ukraine.
We haven't lost one American, y'all, except domestically while we send all their money to another country, y'all.
Many mercenaries.
I don't care if anybody living here.
Y'all.
They don't have minerals. They don't have minerals inside them. I've opened them up and looked.
Been blown up over there.
And this is a bird's eye view of the compartmentalized mind of a psychopath.
Hey, you ever been to an Abercrombie and Fitch party?
I mean, you listen to him, he has no idea that he's actually even saying anything wrong. He thinks it's totally normal to welcome the extinction of a whole generation of Ukrainians to get all the material goods that you and I want.
It wasn't no Americans, y'all. By the way, we have lost Americans. What is he talking about?
So we finally have an ally willing to commit suicide so we can have rare earth minerals for our cell phones and electric cars, y'all.
You ever hear of a crash dummy? It's prison talk.
Don't
They
you
all kinds of silly phrases.
don't you dare fuck this deal up by caring about the people. So it just blows my mind that there are grown-up people that I've known all my life who fell for the Ukraine war bullshit. Well, of course, Kyle and Crystal did. Of course they did.
No, Kyle did. Crystal didn't. Kyle is like a puppet. All your friends, look, whatever you people think North Korea is, that's what they are. Controlled, mind-controlled puppets. We have a very sophisticated version of mind control, not the primitive North Korea kind where they all clap at the same time. We have a kind that's a little bit looser and more high-tech. That's why we make fun of them, because their method of control, oh, they spy on you all day in North Korea. Do they? They spy on their
Oh, my
citizens? You
God.
don't say. They'll just put you in a prison and watch you. Do they do that there? It's mind control. It's called mind control or crowd control. If people are uncomfortable with the phrase mind control, which is a real thing they've never given up on. And it works. It works. And if you're wondering the mystery of how someone could cut off their family on Thanksgiving over this shit, now you know.
Now you know. It is mind control, and they never stopped. And it's been going on since they invented the CIA, and that was right after World War II. And they immediately infiltrated any social movement that had anything to do with economics to help people. And they made sure that you didn't emphasize the economics, but they ramped up the cultural side. So we all fight over it.
What do you think the 60s were? You know, Yoko was from an aristocratic family. Did you know that? And she's the one that got John Lennon back on acid and got him to try heroin because she was a control there to sabotage him. The 27 Club of all the musicians that all die at 27 and people act like it's some magical thing. Do you think it is magic, or do you think it's because they're very deeply involved in all the pop culture on purpose? And when these people outlive the usefulness, they go away. They die. They all hang themselves. There's the same thing keeps happening over and over again. A CIA guy just admitted to killing Bob Marley on his deathbed. Did you see that?
No.
Yeah. And, I mean, the guy, Mark David Chapman, that shot John Lennon, who's obsessed with Catcher in the Rye, that's another Sirhan.
Yes.
That's what all this stuff is.
Come see us doing live shows.
Give me 1 second.
With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, Donald Trump, who we haven't really seen very much of since November the 5th, he's been knocking out these cabinet appointments, these administration appointments at a nice clip. And occasionally we see footage of him messing around with Elon Musk, which is, again, it's kind of a strange kind of friendship. But
it's turning into a bromance.
It is a bromance. I mean, so there was a footage of him at Mar-a-Lago on Thanksgiving, and the two of them were just practically hugging each other. There was a strange thing. I mean,
it's
I think
gotta
they
be
literally were hugging each other, sitting next to each other.
Got to be a frat brat environment, yeah.
Yeah.
No, Trump doesn't drink, so
He doesn't. He doesn't drink, which is it's some kind of very very strange. But anyway, yesterday Trump sent out a not a tweet, a truth. It's a truth. I mean, I don't know what else you can.
I don't. What else do you say? Like the
Yeah. About BRICS. So he had already been this week issuing threats to impose tariffs. So he was hitting Canada and Mexico with 25% tariffs unless they do something about migration and the flow of fentanyl into the United States. And then he also threatened China with, I think, 10% tariff, also related to fentanyl. But the threat of tariffs that he came up with yesterday was quite a striking one, because this time he threatened BRICS, the BRICS countries, and said, if you dare to move towards developing your own reserve currency, expect a 100% tariff. So let me just show you this tweet that he, or tweet or truth rather, that he sent out. Yeah. So here's the here's what he says. The idea that, so maybe make it see a bit bigger. The idea that the BRICS countries are trying to move away from the dollar while we stand by and watch is over. We require a commitment from these countries that they will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty US dollar, or they will face a 100% tariffs and should expect to say goodbye to selling into the wonderful US economy. They can go find another sucker. There is no chance that the BRICS will replace the US dollar in international trade. and any country that tries should wave goodbye to America. So there are a number of aspects of it which are very strange. In the first place, BRICS isn't doing anything to create their own currency. They're not developing their own reserve currency.
They're working on an interbank system, something like the SWIFT system.
Something like that, but even that, they're very far from.
I chose my word carefully, something like, okay? Also, I doubt anyone in Trump's orbit watched the BRICS meeting in Kazan in October, is that Putin was seen carrying a BRICS note, but it was done in a kind of a tongue-in-cheek. It wasn't serious about it. Okay? Now,
Yes.
Trade among BRIC countries, of course, they want to do it in their own currency, but I don't know. My biggest question is not the content of this. I mean, who put him up to this?
I don't know. I mean, I think, well, that's a very interesting question, because there have been people such as Steve Bannon who have expressed concern about BRICS and what BRICS is doing and so on. But Bannon, he's kind of ambivalent himself, because he's saying that, well, okay, they might do that. Again, they're nowhere near to doing it, but so they might do that. But that's not necessarily a bad thing for the United States, and that's really the issue. It's not that great to be the reserve currency, and particularly if, like Trump, your main issue is American deindustrialization. Your main issue is the trade deficit, which means that industry is kind of moving out and capital is moving in. Then it doesn't help to have the strong dollar. It doesn't really help to have the reserve currency. So it's very strange that, given that that's your issue, which is deindustrialization and the big swooshing sound that Ross Perot talked about, then why do you want to have it? Why do you want this thing, this having your is the reserve currency and having this very strong dollar? It works against your industries to have a very strong dollar.
And of course, it gives you so much more maneuverability with your currency. I mean, look, we still had the Deutschmark, and we still have the Japanese yen. I think they were always criticized for undervaluing,
right?
Because it worked to their advantage trade-wise. I mean, this whole issue about de-dollarization is a storm in a teacup, in my opinion.
I think so.
I hear it all of the time. There is a very slow, I guess you call it de-dollarization. I don't, if we didn't have that word around, we wouldn't be using it. But people are relying more on their own currencies because they want to avoid sanctions. Okay, that's what it's all about. Okay?
Right, and that's it.
It's not the hatred of the dollar per se.
Exactly.
It's how the Treasury Department uses it. Okay,
right, exactly.
So I mean, it's not like we don't like dollars because they're dollars. It's just that there's a halo. Yep. And I use that in a negative sense around that currency. Now, Trump could change that.
Exactly. That's the point. That's the reason they try to avoid the dollar. But it's a great inconvenience, because doing your trade in your national currencies is extremely inconvenient, because you then have an accumulation of, I don't know, rupees. And then you have well, what am I going to do with all these rupees? Normally, you have rupees, you can then exchange them into dollars. Well, you can't do that, because then the Americans can just swoop in and seize your dollars.
Another big problem with doing intra-country trade in two currencies is that valuations change.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's very confusing. I mean, I thought it was worth this last week, and now it's like, what? Okay, that's one of the things. That's one of I want BRICS to succeed. I'd like them to have their own currency. I'd like all of these things, but I'm a realist, okay? These things might happen one day to one degree or another, okay? But the obstacles are immense.
Exactly.
And at the end of the day, if a country can see the advantage of doing trade in dollars, they're going to do it.
Right. No, I think everybody wants to do business in the dollar. So it's like nobody wants to get rid of the reserve currency, because having a reserve currency is very, very useful for everybody, because that means you can change it. That means you can do trade all over the world if there's a reserve currency. But the only reason why countries want to avoid that is precisely because of what policies that Trump has pursued and other US presidents, is to seize other countries' dollar assets. They did that with Iran, which preventing Iran from earning an income from its oil assets. And that's the problem. It's the United States that has put itself into this position that countries are thinking of ways to avoid having to use dollars. But as you said, it's a very easy solution. Don't seize countries' dollar assets, and they'll be more than happy to leave the dollar as the global reserve currency.
The reserve currency, that's what it is. Okay, it's not. Again, I don't want to make it sound too opaque, but let's take the word dollar out and let's say reserve currency. That's what everybody wants. That's to everyone's benefit.
Right.
But if you have to look over your shoulder to see if the Treasury Department is going to freeze your bank account in a third country, right, without any due process, no trial, you can't. But let me explain. There's none of that. I mean, it's really one of the most amazing things when you look at Western lawfare. There is no there's no recourse. You're just like, you're cut. You're done.
That's right. That's exactly right.
You can't call, get your lawyer. Can you call the Treasury Department and explain that you misunderstand? No, you can. It's done.
No, that's right. I mean, they did that to Iran. They've done that to Russia. They just basically seize your dollar holdings, and that's really the problem. Now, but that again is a separate issue from the Trump's insistence on pursuing this strong dollar, which it goes together with the reserve currency, which is you get a very strong currency, but that works against your industry. And that was so when America, during the Cold War and basically since the World War II, the United States had a strong dollar, and it was done with a view to helping U.S. client states develop their industries. And they said, okay, fine, we'll run a trade deficit, but that'll help Germany to recover, that'll help Japan recover, South Korea to build up its industry. We don't care because it's all in dollars. So whatever trade deficit we run, the dollars come back. It's a nice deal, but it means essentially that you're losing your industrial base, and you become a financialized economy, because then the dollars, they come back to the United States because of the overvalued dollars, and that's how you pay for your trade deficit. So it's a boon for Wall Street, but that's not what Trump's agenda is. Trump's agenda is not to go on being a boon for Wall Street.
I don't know what the exact number is now, but at the end of the Second World War, the U.S. economy, standalone by itself, made up 50% of global GDP. Think about that, okay? Half of all business trends, economic, everything was controlled or around the United States. Now it's like 13%, something like that. It's less than 20 for sure, okay? And George is right. During the Cold War, during the rebuilding of Europe, expanding into Asia, particularly South Korea and Japan, Philippines to some extent. Yeah, we can take a loss. We can take a loss for geopolitical reasons. We can take a loss. We're allies. We're going to take care of the Cold War. But when that all came to an end, who's left holding the bag? Because Japan was rebuilt, South Korea was built, Europe it's a bigger economy than the United States. Okay, I'm not against tariffs. I think if it's done laser right in certain areas, I think it can work. What Trump is talking about is just nonsense. It's a feel-good message, but it doesn't stand up to muster. I'm sorry.
No, I think but it's also a little bit amusing how the media are covering it, because of course they hate Trump, and everything that Trump says is obviously outrageous and arrogant and horrific, and everything named in the book. But in this case, they're going after BRICS, and they're thinking, hey, BRICS, aren't we supposed to hate BRICS? I mean, isn't that Putin and Xi, and isn't Iran? So whose side are we supposed to take? And they're kind of very confused about this. They're not true. Hey, are you going to now go into bat for BRICS? Going to say that this is really outrageous and unfair on Trump's part to start picking on BRICS. So I think, like, Politico has a story that covers the story, and there's a picture of Putin. Picture of Putin to illustrate BRICS. So okay, so that means that's a good thing, isn't it? Because we're obviously, Trump is trying to hurt Putin, but that's really the thing. I mean, they're saying he's trying to hurt BRICS, but he's not going to hurt BRICS because BRICS isn't moving towards creating their own currency. They're not moving towards creating a new global reserve currency. So the 100% tariff and the no access to the American market, it's not going to materialize. I mean, he's going to impose all these individual tariffs, there's no question, but this big tariff, 100% tariff against BRICS, that ain't going to happen.
Well, also, if you look at projections over the next 25, 30, 40 years, most of the growth, economic activity is going to be in BRICS countries. So, I mean, Donald Trump, don't kiss it goodbye, all right? And then, of course, there's the political, even kind of philosophical side of BRICS. It's like, yeah, I told you, we have to integrate more. I just can't overestimate everyone how difficult that is, okay? Because the dollar is the ultimate financial drug, okay? And it's really hard to get out. I wish I could. That'd be great. But it's not going to happen. It's happening very slowly for a wide variety of reasons. Like the Saudis are saying, well, we can sell our oil in other currencies. And that's something that's a big change. But they're not going to say goodbye to the dollar.
No, exactly.
One of the biggest investors in Wall Street, for God's sake.
Exactly. Since Saudi Arabia does so much business with the United States, it needs the dollars. I mean, because basically it's continually purchasing arms that it doesn't need. I mean, that's how they keep the Saudi Arabia going, which is, this enormous quantity of money that we make on selling oil. Well, what do we do with it? Well, we pump it into the American economy and buy all these fighter jets and AWACS and whatever. And the Americans are very happy, but you kind of need dollars to pay for all that. And Saudi Arabia is not going to give up doing business in dollars.
Again, who whispered this into Trump's ear? Was it Gorka or somebody like that?
I think he may have picked it up from Bannon, but as I say, Bannon is quite ambivalent about this, because he's saying, we don't really need, this being the reserve currency. I mean, we've been doing it, a nice favor. I mean, it's nice to be the almighty dollar and having we are the reserve currency, but there are a lot of disadvantages that go together with being the reserve currency. So, you can easily argue it the other way, which is, hey, we don't need the hassle. So, maybe he got it from Bannon, but they didn't fully understand exactly what Bannon was getting at.
Well, Trump's truth or post, whatever. I'm sure as it's being read all around the world, they're all saying, "Yep, he's back." He hasn't changed his postings whatsoever.
No.
Our wonderful beloved,
our wonderful beloved dollar.
China and Russia have dramatically reshaped global energy dynamics with the completion of the world's largest single-pipe natural gas pipeline, connecting two strategic economic powers in a move that could fundamentally alter international energy markets. The massive infrastructure project spans an extraordinary 5,111 kilometers, linking Russia's far eastern regions directly to China's industrial heartland and stretching all the way to Shanghai. According to China's state television, the pipeline was completed 7 months ahead of schedule, signaling unprecedented efficiency and commitment between the two nations. The project promises to deliver 38 billion cubic meters of natural gas annually, sufficient to meet the energy needs of approximately 130 million urban households across China's most populous regions. This unprecedented energy corridor represents far more than a simple infrastructure project. It is a geopolitical statement that could potentially reconfigure global energy dependencies and challenge Western economic influence. The pipeline connects directly to Russia's Power of Siberia network, creating an energy superhighway that bypasses traditional Western-controlled transit routes and establishes a direct economic lifeline between Moscow and Beijing. Chinese authorities have emphasized that the project aligns perfectly with their ambitious dual carbon strategy, targeting peak carbon emissions by 2030 and achieving complete carbon neutrality by 2060. Strategically, the pipeline provides China with a stable, long-term energy source while offering Russia a critical economic outlet amid Western sanctions, creating a mutually beneficial partnership that strengthens both nations' global positioning. Experts suggest this infrastructure represents more than an energy transaction. It's a powerful geopolitical statement demonstrating how Russia and China are constructing alternative economic networks that challenge existing international power structures. The pipeline's completion comes at a moment of significant global tension, with Western nations increasingly concerned about the deepening strategic alignment between Russia and China. Economically, the project could potentially reshape energy markets by creating a massive, direct energy corridor that reduces reliance on traditional maritime and continental transit routes controlled by Western interests. For Europe, already grappling with energy uncertainties following tensions with Russia, this pipeline represents a potential long-term challenge to its energy security and economic strategies. The project's technical specifications are equally impressive. It represents the world's largest single-pipe natural gas transmission capacity, capable of delivering massive energy volumes with unprecedented efficiency. Chinese state media have highlighted that the pipeline not only supports national energy security, but also represents a significant step toward achieving more sustainable and environmentally responsible energy consumption. While the pipeline represents a significant achievement, it is not without potential environmental and operational challenges. Environmental impact assessments for similar large-scale energy infrastructure projects have consistently highlighted concerns about ecosystem disruption, marine life impacts, and long-term climate implications. The project faces multiple potential risks, including geopolitical uncertainties, complex operational challenges in remote regions, and the need to balance energy demands with environmental sustainability goals. The harsh Siberian terrain and vast geographical span of the pipeline present significant logistical and maintenance challenges. Operational considerations extend beyond mere infrastructure. The pipeline's success is intricately linked to the geopolitical relationship between Russia and China, with any potential tensions potentially impacting its long-term viability. Economic challenges include ensuring competitive gas pricing and generating sufficient revenue to justify the massive investment. Despite these challenges, the pipeline represents a strategic move by both nations to create alternative economic networks. It demonstrates their commitment to energy independence and their ability to develop large-scale infrastructure projects that challenge traditional Western-dominated economic frameworks. The broader implications of this project extend far beyond immediate energy needs. It signals a potential fundamental realignment of global economic and political relationships, showcasing how emerging powers can collaborate to create new strategic pathways. With this massive infrastructure project, China and Russia have sent a clear message to the international community. They are prepared to forge their own path, independent of traditional Western-dominated economic frameworks. The pipeline's completion marks a pivotal moment in global energy geopolitics, signaling a new era of strategic cooperation between two of the world's most significant economic and political powers.
Everyday U.S. politicians tell us that America must decouple from China and move manufacturing back to the United States. But something remarkable is happening behind the scenes. When you look at the data, some of the largest and most important American companies are actually increasing their manufacturing in China, buying more components from China, and building a deeper relationship with China. As the world prepares for a second Donald Trump presidency this January, all eyes will be on the White House as Trump navigates this complex U.S.-China relationship. Throughout his re-election campaign, Trump told American voters that he would be tough on China, threatening to impose tariffs on all Chinese imports. But will this strategy actually work? Is it possible for Donald Trump and his cabinet to sanction and tariff their way to success and bring manufacturing jobs back to America? While all of this sounds good to Republican voters who believe Donald Trump will make America great again, the simple reality is it's almost impossible to move these jobs back to the United States for three main reasons. In today's video, we're going to break down these reasons and explain why no matter what Donald Trump does in office, China will remain the key driver of economic growth for the majority of nations around the world, including the United States. This is going to be a fun episode. Let's begin. Today's video is sponsored by Private Internet Access. Stay tuned for an exciting offer from our sponsor. Let's start by establishing a baseline and looking at the sheer volume of trade that happens between the US and China. Take a look at this chart that shows the trade balance between the two countries over the past quarter century. You'll notice that over the last decade, the US has been sharply increasing its trade with China almost every single year. Let's take it one step further and examine the total value of monthly imports and exports between the US and China over the past 24 months. Once again, notice the remarkable consistency. There has been no significant decrease in trade. Despite all the rhetoric coming from Washington, D.C., it's business as usual between the US and China. To understand why this is happening, we simply need to do alternative research outside of the mainstream media, which only portrays China in a negative light. For example, if you read this white paper report published by the American Chamber of Commerce in China, it reveals the exact mindset of many US companies. More than 90% of the participating companies select China as one of the most important investment destinations, and 75% of the companies plan to reinvest in China. There is a phenomenal shift happening right now because China is inventing the technology that will control the future of our world. Don't believe me? Look at this article from the Financial Times. EU to demand technology transfers from Chinese companies. For decades, a core part of China's development strategy was to find clever ways to transfer technology from the West. But now, the roles are reversed. The West is trying to figure out how to transfer technology from China. In fact, this is one of the biggest misconceptions about China. Most people believe foreign companies relocate their manufacturing to China for cheap labor, but this is actually false. Just listen to the wise words of Apple CEO Tim Cook as he reveals the truth.
There's a confusion about China, and let me at least give you my opinion. The popular conception is that companies come to China because of low labor costs. I'm not sure what part of China they go to, but the truth is China stopped being the low labor cost country many years ago. The reason is because of the skill, the quantity of skill in one location, and the type of skill it is.
Tim Cook speaks the simple truth. What good is it to have low labor costs if you can't find highly skilled people to manufacture your products and don't have the infrastructure to transport the goods? If labor costs were the #1 aspect of manufacturing, then we would see thousands of foreign companies scrambling to India to build factories. But despite India's cheap labor, the country doesn't have the skilled workers or the infrastructure to compete with China. I broke all of this down in another video, 10 reasons why India is not the next China. I'll link it for you to watch at the end of today's video. But once again, we need to dig deeper into this story and reveal to you the real reason why China will continue to be the world's factory. In the future, manufacturing will be defined by a shift to clean energy, which means that solar panels, wind turbines, and electric vehicles will be at the forefront. And when it comes to green energy, China is the undeniable powerhouse, completely dominating the industry. Their control over these technologies isn't just significant, it's a game changer. And it's why research articles are being published showcasing that China holds all the cards in the great green energy game. Inside this article, it reveals that crucial rare earth minerals are needed for the green energy transition. And once again, China holds a near monopoly. We simply cannot understate the value of these rare earth metals. Back in 1987, Deng Xiaoping famously said that the Middle East has oil and China has rare earths. He couldn't be more correct. While the reserves of rare earths are scattered around the globe, 40% are found in China. When it comes to extracting them, over 70% of rare earths are mined in China. Further downstream, China trumps all, processing nearly 90% of rare earths. Not only does China own the entire supply chain, but China also has the most talent and research into the fields that will drive the 21st century. It's no secret that China is producing the most amount of STEM graduates, and science, technology, engineering, and mathematics is not only the future of manufacturing, but also the future of our world, with STEM jobs projected to grow faster than all other jobs over the next decade. China has an outsized dominance in mining and mineral engineering. In fact, if we look at the recent global ranking, Chinese universities dominate this field, occupying 6 of the top 10 positions, with Australia occupying the remaining 4. The USA doesn't have a single university that ranks in the top 15. When it comes to the production and purification of metals, this is a specialized field of engineering called metallurgical engineering. Once again, China dominates this field, occupying all top 5 positions, with the US having only 1 university in the top 10. And finally, let's look at chemical engineering, which tells a similar story. MIT, one of the best American universities, ranks number 1 worldwide in this field, but China occupies 13 of the top 16 positions. Combine this with the sheer volume of STEM graduates coming from China every year, and it's easy to see why China is the dominant force in high-end manufacturing. Once again, let's listen to Apple CEO Tim Cook explain why this engineering expertise is so important to foreign companies manufacturing in China.
The products we do require really advanced tooling, and the precision that you have to have in tooling and working with the materials that we do are state of the art. And the tooling skill is very deep here. You know, in the US, you could have a meeting of tooling engineers, and I'm not sure we could fill the room. In China, you could fill multiple football fields. It's that vocational expertise is very deep, very, very deep here.
Video clips like these are almost impossible to find in Western media because it goes against everything our US politicians preach to us every day. US politicians want you to believe that China is the greatest threat to America, when in reality, China has helped grow the US economy tremendously over the past 50 years. The New York Times recently published an amazing article entitled "Breaking Up with China is Hard to Do," and inside it reveals some astonishing facts about the US-China trade war that will absolutely amaze you. I'm going to break them down for you, but first, I do want to give a huge thank you to Private Internet Access, who is the sponsor of today's video and an important tool that I literally use every single day of my life. Whenever you connect to the internet on a public Wi-Fi network at airports, coffee shops, or even at your own home, your data is at risk of being stolen. But a virtual private network, or VPN for short, is an app that hides your IP address coming from China, and many American companies are left with an interesting question to answer. Should we attempt to compete with China and overtake their technology at a significant cost, or do we cede the market to the Chinese and simply become their customers? This is the exact dilemma that Jim Farley, CEO of Ford Motor Company, is facing. Throughout 2024, Mr. Farley spent a significant amount of time in China and came back to the US realizing that legacy car makers face an existential threat in China. China is simply too far ahead in the EV industry that Western automakers literally have no chance to compete with China. Ford has predicted they will lose $5 billion on its electric vehicle operations, and remember, that's in spite of high tariffs that block Chinese EVs from entering the American market. Ford has now decided its best option is to pivot strategies and take subsidies from the US government to make batteries in Michigan. But here's the catch. Ford will license the battery technology from China's CATL, the world's largest maker of EV batteries, once again proving that without China, Ford would not have a future in the EV industry. But now let's take a look at Apple's business in China and reveal just how important China is to one of America's most valuable brands. Earlier this year, Nikkei Asia reported that Apple is moving closer to China despite supply chain shifts. Once again, there is a stark difference between what US politicians preach and what pragmatic business leaders are doing in China. Apple is increasing its use of parts from both Chinese suppliers and manufacturing sites while using fewer suppliers from Taiwan, the United States, Japan, and South Korea. Despite political tensions between the US and China, the 21st century belongs to Asia, and smart American companies will embrace this shift to the east. Apple announced earlier this year it was expanding a research center in Shanghai and opening a new tech lab in Shenzhen. But if the domination in resources, technology, and talent isn't enough, the infrastructure used to facilitate this manufacturing and transport it around the world is second to none. From fully automated ports to the most extensive high-speed rail network, China has spent decades building up a world-class network of infrastructure that simply no other nation can compete with. In addition, let's not forget the over 150 countries who have joined China's Belt and Road Initiative. Altogether, China has built the world's largest and most extensive trading network that further cements its status as the world's factory and ensures that not only are products going to continue to be made in China, but they will be seamlessly transported and distributed efficiently throughout the globe. As you can see, the cards are stacked pretty heavily against America. Instead of adopting some of China's industrial policies to catch up or allowing American consumers to benefit from affordable, high-quality Chinese products, our politicians have made the worst decision possible. Trump decided to use tariffs as his main tool to address the trade deficit during his first term, which was then carried over and expanded during the Biden administration. We have almost 8 years of data to show that tariffs do not work in their reported purpose of relocating factories back to the United States. Instead, the additional costs from tariffs are passed on to the consumer, making everyday Americans, and certainly not China, the biggest loser. If you find this hard to believe, simply listen to the wise words of billionaire investor Mark Cuban, who explains why tariffs always fail. The majority of American consumers will not pay up for American-made products. If they would, all of this would be moot. Companies would have an incentive to build here, even if it costs more. The second is companies, by default, are patriotic and want to build here. If they could build cheaper here, they already would be doing so. To be honest, this is such a simple concept to understand. In order for manufacturing to come back to the United States, one of two things need to happen. Number one, the cost of manufacturing has to be reduced. Or number two, the price buyers are willing to pay has to go up. It is as simple as that. This is not complex, but it's amazing how so many US politicians don't understand basic economics. Consumers will always prefer the lowest cost option of a product, regardless of where it comes from. This just goes to show that these tariffs are unserious and politically motivated. I'll share with you one final case study that illustrates this point so clearly. In 2008, the United States was the powerhouse manufacturer of solar panels, controlling over 45% of market share. But fast forward 16 years, and US manufacturing is barely visible on this graph. China has transformed the industry with superior manufacturing and now dominates the future of solar energy. This is an important lesson for all Americans to learn. It wasn't so long ago that we could compete at mass-producing critical technologies like solar panels, but with the wrong government policies in place, the number one position can change in just a few short years. At the end of the day, the idea that America can easily decouple from China just doesn't hold up against the reality of the global manufacturing landscape. China's dominance in green energy, rare earth minerals, engineering talent, and infrastructure is simply unmatched. For America to bring manufacturing back, it would need massive investments in workforce development, infrastructure, and supply chain. But instead, we're doubling down on tariffs, which, as we've seen, will only add costs for the American consumers while leaving China's grip on global manufacturing largely untouched. Unless the US makes serious changes to its industrial policies and priorities, the Made in America dream might just stay that, a dream. Instead of hoping tariffs or political pressure will somehow change the fundamental economic advantages that China holds, it's time for America to rethink its approach and focus on building a competitive edge where it really matters. Everyone, thank you for making it to this point of the video. And if you want to see a behind-the-scenes tour of an actual
Since the onset of the Russia-Ukraine conflict in February 2022, China's role and stance have come under intense scrutiny. Western governments and analysts have accused China of providing indirect support to Russia, raising questions about Beijing's claims of neutrality and its broader strategic objectives. The recent news about a joint military drill between China and Russia has further escalated tensions between Western and Eastern blocs. Ukraine has consistently received support from the European Union and the United States since the start of the conflict. These alignments and alliances appear to have deepened the divide between nations, posing significant risks to global stability. In this video, we will examine the recent developments surrounding the China-Russia joint military drill and explore the extent of collaboration between the two nations. We will also analyze the level and nature of support Ukraine has received from its allies since the start of the war and compare it to the backing Russia has garnered. First, let's begin by discussing the relationship between China and Russia, both before and after the war. The relationship between Russia and China has undergone dramatic transformations over centuries, shaped by territorial disputes, ideological rivalry, pragmatic alliances, and shared interests. Relations between Russia and China began in the 17th century as the Tsardom of Russia expanded eastward, reaching China's borders under the Qing dynasty. Initial encounters were marked by territorial disputes in the Amur River region, leading to the Treaty of Nerchinsk in 1689, the first treaty between Imperial China and a European power, which established borders and regulated trade. In the 19th century, Russia capitalized on China's weakening Qing dynasty during the Century of Humiliation by acquiring large tracts of territory through unequal treaties, such as the Treaty of Aigun in 1858 and the Treaty of Beijing in 1860, annexing parts of Manchuria. Following the Bolshevik Revolution, Soviet Russia supported the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, against the Kuomintang, or KMT, during China's Civil War, providing training, arms, and ideological guidance. After the CCP's victory in 1949, China and the Soviet Union formed an alliance under the Treaty of Friendship, Alliance, and Mutual Assistance, which solidified military and economic cooperation. However, by the late 1950s, ideological and geopolitical differences emerged. Mao Zedong criticized Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev's policy of peaceful coexistence with the West, leading to a split. Tensions escalated into violent border skirmishes along the Ussuri River in 1969. In response to Soviet hostility, China sought rapprochement with the United States, exemplified by President Richard Nixon's visit to Beijing in 1972, further isolating the Soviet Union during the Cold War. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Russia and China sought to rebuild ties. In 1989, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev visited Beijing, marking a thaw in relations. The two nations resolved lingering border disputes, fostering mutual trust. In the 1990s, both nations faced Western dominance and NATO expansion, prompting closer alignment. The 2001 Treaty of Good Neighborliness and Friendly Cooperation formalized their strategic partnership, focusing on security, trade, and regional stability. Bilateral trade surged in the early 21st century, driven by China's demand for Russian energy and Russia's reliance on Chinese goods. Major projects, such as the Power of Siberia gas pipeline launched in 2019, solidified economic ties. Military collaboration also intensified, with joint exercises like Vostok 2018 and naval drills showcasing growing defense cooperation. Both nations oppose U.S.-led alliances like NATO and AUKUS, viewing them as threats to regional stability. Just before the Russia-Ukraine conflict, in February 2022, China and Russia declared a no-limits partnership, emphasizing mutual support against Western influence. Since February 2022, the trade relationship between China and Russia has expanded significantly, reaching record highs and reflecting deepening economic interdependence. Bilateral trade hit $190 billion in 2022, a 34.3% increase from the previous year, and continued its upward trajectory in 2023, growing to $240 billion, a 26.3% rise. This growth has been driven by increased exchanges in energy, industrial goods, and consumer products, as well as shifts in global economic dynamics due to Western sanctions on Russia. Energy has been the cornerstone of Russia's exports to China, with crude oil, coal, and natural gas dominating trade flows. In 2022, Russia exported $101 billion worth of goods to China, with crude petroleum accounting for $51 billion, followed by coal briquettes at $9.64 billion, and petroleum gas at $9.5 billion. China's role as a reliable buyer of Russian energy has been critical for Moscow amid restrictions imposed by Western countries. Meanwhile, China's exports to Russia surged, reaching $75.4 billion in 2022 and growing to approximately $110.94 billion by 2023. Key Chinese exports included broadcasting equipment, computers, and large construction vehicles, demonstrating Russia's reliance on Chinese industrial and consumer goods to sustain its economy. The automotive sector has seen notable shifts, with Chinese car makers capturing a dominant share of Russia's market. By 2024, Chinese brands accounted for 57% of car sales in Russia, a sharp increase from 9% before the conflict began. This rise highlights China's ability to fill gaps left by Western automakers who exited the Russian market due to sanctions. Financial transactions between the two nations have also evolved, with increased use of the Chinese yuan for trade settlements. However, challenges emerged in 2024 as smaller Chinese banks limited direct yuan transactions with Russian entities, reflecting concerns over secondary sanctions from Western countries. The trade relationship between China and Russia has strategic and economic implications. While China has become Russia's largest trading partner, accounting for a substantial share of its imports and exports, the partnership is asymmetrical. Russia represents a smaller fraction of China's global trade, underscoring Beijing's broader diversification strategy. Nevertheless, the partnership provides Russia with critical economic support and positions China as a key player in global trade realignments. The U.S. has been the largest provider of military aid to Ukraine, committing approximately $45 billion in arms and military assistance from February 2022 to February 2023. This support includes advanced weaponry such as Javelin anti-tank missiles, HIMARS rocket systems, and more recently, the authorization for Ukraine to use longer-range ATACMS missiles. In November 2024, President Joe Biden prepared a $725 million arms package for Ukraine, encompassing anti-tank weapons, drones, and missiles. Moreover, the U.S. Congress approved over $112 billion in aid to Ukraine in 2022, with an additional $95 billion aid package for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan approved in April 2024. This financial support aims to bolster Ukraine's economy and assist in its reconstruction efforts. Let's take a quick pause. If you've enjoyed the video so far, could we ask a small favor? Hitting the like button helps us reach a broader audience, and sharing your thoughts or European Union support. The EU and its member states have collectively provided close to $133 billion in financial, military, humanitarian, and refugee assistance to Ukraine since the conflict began. In February 2024, EU leaders agreed to commit up to $54 billion until 2027 through the Ukraine facility to support Ukraine's recovery, reconstruction, and modernization. The EU has stepped up its military support, including the provision of lethal arms through the European Peace Facility. As of November 2024, the EU's contribution under this facility for Ukraine totals around €5.6 billion. The UK has contributed significantly to Ukraine's military defense, providing Storm Shadow cruise missiles, Challenger 2 tanks, and various types of artillery systems. British forces have also trained thousands of Ukrainian soldiers, emphasizing modern combat tactics and interoperability with NATO equipment. While the UK's financial aid primarily focuses on direct economic support and humanitarian efforts, it also includes funding for military logistics and supplies, ensuring the smooth delivery of arms to Ukraine. Canada has pledged over €2 billion in military assistance, including armored vehicles, drones, artillery, and ammunition. Canadian forces have also provided training for Ukrainian troops under Operation Unifier. Canada has provided financial aid aimed at stabilizing Ukraine's economy and supporting reconstruction efforts, though specific figures are not detailed in the available sources. Poland has been a key logistical hub for transferring Western military aid to Ukraine and has supplied military equipment, including MiG-29 fighter jets, Leopard tanks, and significant quantities of ammunition. Poland has allocated funds to support Ukraine's economy and has invested in humanitarian and military logistics to ensure efficient aid delivery, though specific figures are not detailed in the available sources. Australia has been a significant contributor to Ukraine's defense efforts, providing a total of over 1.3 billion Australian dollars in military assistance since the conflict began. In October 2024, Australia announced the donation of 49 M1A1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine, valued at approximately 245 million Australian dollars. These tanks are expected to enhance Ukraine's offensive capabilities and are considered superior to many Russian-operated tanks. Australia has supplied multiple Bushmaster protected mobility vehicles, which have been instrumental in providing protected transport for Ukrainian troops. The Australian government has delivered artillery systems and corresponding ammunition to bolster Ukraine's long-range combat abilities. In July 2024, Australia announced a military assistance package worth nearly 250 million Australian dollars, including air defense missiles and air-to-ground weapons. Australia's overall support for Ukraine exceeds 1.5 billion Australian dollars, encompassing both military aid and financial assistance. This includes contributions to international funds aimed at procuring priority military capabilities for Ukraine. Sweden has been a significant contributor to Ukraine's defense efforts, providing a total of approximately 48.4 billion Swedish kroner, or around 4.2 billion euros, in military support as of October 2, 2024. This assistance has evolved from initial supplies of personal protective equipment to more advanced weaponry and systems. Notable contributions include: Sweden has facilitated Ukraine's acquisition of new CV-90 infantry fighting vehicles, enhancing its ground combat capabilities. The 17th support package, announced in September 2024, included 6 additional combat boat 90s to strengthen the Ukrainian Navy's operations on rivers and coastal areas. Sweden has provided spare parts and maintenance support for 14 JAS-39 Gripen fighter jets, bolstering Ukraine's air defense and operational readiness. The 16th military support package, valued at approximately 1.16 billion euros, included early warning aircraft, missiles, and air defense systems to counter aerial threats. Sweden has committed around 9 billion Swedish kroner, or approximately 785 million euros, in civilian and humanitarian support to Ukraine since February 2022. Norway has been a steadfast supporter of Ukraine's military defense, providing various forms of assistance. The country has donated additional NASAMS air defense systems, valued at 335 million Norwegian krone, to enhance Ukraine's ability to protect against aerial attacks. Norway has supplied artillery systems and ammunition, including 10,000 artillery shells, to support Ukraine's ground operations. Donations have included armored vehicles and tanks to strengthen Ukraine's mechanized units. Norway's financial support is channeled through the Nansen Support Program for Ukraine, which was initially set at 75 billion Norwegian krone, approximately 7 billion euros, for 2023 to 2027. In November 2024, the Norwegian Parliament extended this program for an additional 3 years, allocating at least 35 billion Norwegian krone, around 3.1 billion euros, in aid to Ukraine for the next year. Japan has committed substantial financial resources to aid Ukraine. In June 2024, during the G7 summit, Japan and Ukraine signed a 10-year security agreement, with Japan pledging $4.5 billion in aid for 2024 and continued support throughout the agreement's term. Japanese officials have engaged in diplomatic efforts to address security concerns arising from the conflict. In November 2024, Japan's foreign minister visited Kyiv to discuss North Korea's military alliance with Russia and the deployment of North Korean troops to support Russia's war in Ukraine. South Korea's support for Ukraine. South Korea has provided humanitarian aid to Ukraine, including a $3 million donation through the World Food Program as part of the Grain from Ukraine initiative. While South Korea has traditionally refrained from supplying weapons to countries in active conflict, recent developments have prompted a reassessment. In November 2024, President Yoon Suk-yeol indicated that South Korea is not ruling out the possibility of providing weapons directly to Ukraine, especially in light of North Korea's deployment of troops to support Russia. South Korea has actively engaged in diplomatic discussions to address the implications of North Korea's involvement in the conflict. In November 2024, President Yoon met with a Ukrainian delegation to formulate countermeasures against the deployment of North Korean soldiers to Russia, expressing concerns about the potential impact on regional security. Now let's shift our focus to the emerging news about China's joint military drill with Russia. Military drill. On November 29, 2024, Chinese and Russian military forces conducted their 9th Joint Strategic Air Patrol over the Sea of Japan, as reported by China's state broadcaster CCTV. This operation is part of an annual cooperation plan between the two nations, reflecting their deepening military ties. Earlier this year, in July, both countries executed a joint air patrol involving nuclear-capable strategic bombers near the U.S. state of Alaska, specifically over the Chukchi Sea, Bering Sea, and the northern Pacific Ocean. This marked the first instance of Chinese bombers operating in the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone, ADIZ. The patrol included 2 Russian Tu-95MS and 2 Chinese H-6K bombers, accompanied by Russian Su-30SM and Su-35S fighters. In response, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, scrambled U.S. and Canadian fighter jets to intercept the formation. NORAD confirmed that the aircraft remained in international airspace and did not enter U.S. or Canadian sovereign territory. These joint patrols underscore the strengthening military cooperation between China and Russia, which has been growing since 2019. The two countries have conducted multiple joint air and naval exercises, enhancing their strategic coordination and operational capabilities. For instance, in September 2024, China and Russia held joint naval and air drills in the Sea of Japan and the Sea of Okhotsk, further solidifying their defense partnership. Let's hope for peace to prevail worldwide, with no further wars or casualties in the future.
Coffee. Follow me.